Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 221. Power filled the tip of the sword. It wasn't a mentality of training. Full power didn't just mean doing something diligently. Zing, Demon King received that power barehanded. Of course, that didn't mean that the Demon King was just going to watch you on. For a high ranker of that level, body was no different from a deadly weapon that could be used better than any other weapon. Warururuk. The flames on the tip of the sword spread out in an instant. The purple flames swept through the Demon King's body. The Demon King opened his mouth at the appearance of the holy fire. Quote? What in the world was he trying to do? The Demon King sucked in the flames that were covering his body. Huwhoop. With his mouth gulped, the Demon King, who had swallowed the fire in one breath, frowned. It was because of the burning sensation he felt inside. It's a hot fire. However, it wasn't that great of a reaction considering that he had swallowed the holy fire. What kind of body was he born with? Yuan suddenly felt as if he was facing Hercules. Then now, quack, power surged into the Demon King's fist. It's my turn, and Yuan felt goosebumps at that reaction. The magic power that dwelled in his fist. The moment it stretched out forward. This crazy, there was no time to even swear. The heart of Uranus that Yuan was holding began to shine. Summoning, Tartarus, chu-chu-chu-chut, magic power began to burst out from his hand. The magic power that was emitted from hell called Tartarus wrapped around his hand. It was an ability that he had started to use since the beginning of the fight, but now he had opened the door to Tartarus even wider. Whack, zing, fist and sword collided. The bodies of the two people were thrown away in different directions. Jeeing, the two people who had been pushed back stopped, pushing against the ground. The Demon King looked at Yuan while clenching and unclenching his hand. What a mysterious power. Paget, Pajijijit, the magic power that was transmitted to the sword through his hand. Using a magic power that wasn't his own like that, it was obvious that his body would suffer. However, that item was suppressing it. And it was the magic power of the darkness attribute, which had the greatest risk among all the magic powers of different attributes. A power that grows stronger by eating away at the user's body. That power is definitely. The Demon King's eyes narrowed. That guy's overlord. Uranus, the worst monster that countless rankers had fought together to defeat. He would suddenly come to mind while fighting Yuan. That armor too, Pusis, the water attribute magic power that was protecting Yuan's body. He had seen all of those skills from Uranus. It felt as if he was fighting a small Uranus. No, maybe he'll grow even bigger than that. Sometimes I forget in the middle of a fight that the Yuan before my eyes is not a ranker. But right now. Crack, crack, from the signs of the penalty starting to flow through his body, the Horse King was able to realize that he was still a player who had not even become a ranker. The tower would not lie. That means it's certain that he's not a ranker. The Horse King's confusion deepened. Is that possible? When I first met Sun Ogong, back then, I was just as shocked. I was surprised by his talent as a player who was still so young but could grow so quickly. However, the Yuan in front of him possessed a power that could not be explained by just talent. The power of Uranus. He had half of Sun Ogong's eyes and even mastered the giant transformation, which was the symbol of Hercules. On top of that, it's not over yet. The Horse King felt that Yuan still hadn't shown his full strength. Drip. A drop of bright red blood fell from Yuan's hand and onto the floor. It was the Horse King's hand that had clashed with the sword, but it was Yuan's hand that was cut. Is he serious? With a body that hasn't fully recovered yet, he has this much power. The Horse King didn't seem to be taking this lightly. He probably wanted to see the maximum potential of the heart of Uranus. The giant's power resides in your entire body. The giant's blood resides in your left arm. Groan. The flow of magic power that was flowing through Yuan's body headed to his right arm. His opponent was the Horse King. Before Hercules appeared, he was known as the King of Strength. With him as the opponent, this much transformation was only natural. Creak. With the power rising in his body, Yuan stepped forward. Boom. The ground he pushed off of caved in, and Yuan's body shot forward. The Horse King felt a different kind of power than before, and he narrowed his eyes even more, finally raising his magic power. And the moment the two were about to collide, sensory territory is activated. Yuan reads the movements. Yuan's eyes read the Horse King's movements. Pow! Yuan's fist struck the Horse King in the chest. The Horse King was pushed back. Yuan swung his sword straight at him. Swish, thud, swish. Groan. Yuan's fist and sword split the Horse King's body open. The sword imbued with Tartarus's magic power left a pitch-black wound on the Horse King's body, and his fist imbued with the power of the giant pushed the Horse King back. At the same time, Yuan felt something strange. Why is it so easy? Yuan's head lifted. He could see the Horse King's eyes, which had been hidden due to their large height difference. And at that moment, Vuong, pow, Yuma's fist slammed down, overturning the unfortunate ground. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The ground shook, and then it began to rise up, pushed up by the force of the blow. Creak, crack, the landscape that Uma had created began to tremble. The ground that had risen up was no longer a pure white cloud. Seeing the fragments of the ground that had risen up, Yuan, who had quickly retreated backward, stuck out his tongue. It looks like there's another Heracles. What would have happened if he hadn't dodged that? Just imagining it sent shivers down his spine. Is it because of that eye? Or is there something else? Thud. Uma returned next to the ground that had risen up. You're good at dodging. His sclera had turned bright red. The gentle look in his eyes was gone, and the eyes of Uma, who was looking at Yuan, had grown cold, as if they held murderous intent. Well, let's see if you can dodge this one too. What the hell, mister? It was clear that he had been the one attacking just a moment ago. He had struck with his fist, which was imbued with the power of gigantification, several times, and he had also felt the sensation of being cut by the tip of a blade. But, the Uma that was now in front of him seemed to not care about any of that. The wound on his chest wasn't that deep, and the spot where his fist had gone in only showed 2 or 3 small bruises. It was truly an ignorant body. Furthermore, the atmosphere is different from before. An alarm bell rang in Yuan's head. This was truly dangerous. It seemed like they were talking about this when they said that once he lost his mind, he would be even more uncontrollable than Sun Ogong. Is it because of Uranus's heart? He was briefly taken aback by Uma's sudden murderous intent. Yuan hurriedly regained his composure. Getting flustered wouldn't solve anything. Here it comes. Whoosh. The sound of his fist swinging could be clearly heard. In the space where his sensory field was spread out, he could see and feel Uma's fist with his heightened senses. Bam! Every time he dodged a blow, Yuan felt like he was hovering between life and death. There was no time to counterattack. Not only was it imbued with strength, Uma's fist was also fast. He could only barely dodge it by concentrating on his fist through the fire of samadhi and leaving his body to his sensory field. I can't win if I just keep dodging. Whoosh! Uma's fist once again flew past Yuan's head. It was laughable. Can't win. That was obvious. Yuan hadn't started this fight to win in the first place. His opponent was the Bull Demon King. Even though it was a story from over 1,000 years ago, he was a high ranker who had stood shoulder to shoulder with the heavenly demon. To tell him to win against such a Bull Demon King. What kind of nonsense is that? If you can't win. Creepy. The voice came from behind him. You're going to die. Bam. Screech. His head shook. He felt his body, which had overcome gravity, flying away. It was an impact that he couldn't possibly overcome with his own strength. He continued to fly like that for a long time. Barely avoiding a clumsy crash landing, Yuan stopped himself by pushing his hand against the ground. The world before his eyes was upside down. Is he serious? Bam! The Demon King charged in. The Demon King, who was charging straight at him, looked like an angry bull. Is he really doing that? The battle with the heavenly realm. It was a battle as big as, if not bigger than, the destruction of Olympus. And the Demon King was one of the most important pieces that Yuan had prepared in order to win that battle with the heavenly realm. Furthermore, he was also Yuan's present for Sun Ogong, who missed him. But what was this situation? Blessing of the sea has been applied to your body. Thwack! Piercing through the magic power surrounding his body, the Demon King's fist struck Yuan's stomach. Q. In an instant, the shock that felt like his insides were exploding pierced through his entire body. The Demon King, who had suddenly gotten closer. And Yuan's hand, which had been waiting for that moment, grabbed the Demon King's arm. Swish, flash, a jet black shockwave exploded from the Demon King's body. The magic power that had flowed out from Tartarus along with the lightning wrapped around the Demon King's body. Crackle, sizzle, sizzle. The lightning exploded at the closest distance. Yu-1 was also affected by the power. For this one chance, Yu-1 had opened the gate to Tartarus wide open through Uranus's heart. Of course, thanks to that, Yu-1 couldn't be safe from the effects of the lightning either. Stumble. The one who had been more directly affected by the shock was the Demon King. This is quite threatening after all. The Demon King's body shook for a moment from the power of the lightning that was wrapped around his entire body. That was because a considerable shock had been transmitted to his body, which was already exhausted. And soon, swish, thud, Yu-1's body, which had been caught in the Demon King's fist and then in Tartarus's power, collapsed on the spot. His willpower is truly amazing. The Demon King looked at Yu-1's hand, which hadn't let go of his arm even though he had lost consciousness. Because of that, Yu-1 looked like he was still half standing even though he had collapsed. His knees were touching the ground, but his head hadn't hit the ground yet. And in the meantime, what? A small child, the size of a palm, hopped and climbed up Yu-1's shoulder. What? Dana yelled loudly at the Demon King as if telling him not to touch him anymore. She looked small and cute rather than imposing. However, unlike her appearance, the Demon King showed more tension when he looked at Dana than he had when he was fighting Yu-1. So it's you, Creek, the Demon King said as he looked at the dozens of mouths and creatures that had appeared around Yu-1 along with Dana's appearance. The monster that was living inside this guy. Chapter 222. The monster that was living inside this guy. Crack, snap, dozens of mouths bared their teeth at the Demon King as if to threaten him. It was a monster of a form he had never seen before. It was also an existence that made instinctive fear squirm inside him just by facing it. It only appears before its master dies, something like this. The Demon King had pushed Wu-1 to the extreme in order to get it out of him. A sense of crisis that he might die. The predator that had revealed its form due to that was threatening the Demon King by breathing at him and gnashing its teeth. Swish, slither, countless mouths approached. The Demon King reached out his hand towards them. Then, snap, sharp teeth bit the Demon King's hand. Ouch, he felt pain in his hand. The Demon King reached out his other hand towards it and stroked around its mouth. I don't intend to harm you. The Demon King turned his head and looked at Dana. The Demon King realized instinctively that the identity of these toothless monsters was the little guy right in front of him. Abba, the guy tilted his head. He looked like he didn't know anything, like a newborn baby, but that wasn't the case at all. The guy's purpose was clear. It was to protect Wu-1, who was right below him. I'm not trying to fight. I just wanted to check with my own eyes. Bah, ABAA. I don't know what you're saying, but... Dana understood what he was saying. But on the other hand, he couldn't understand what Dana was saying. The Demon King's gaze turned to the predator that wouldn't let go of his hand. If you don't let go, I'll have no choice but to use force. Bam! Strength entered his remaining hand. At the same time, a fist filled with magic energy reached out towards the predator's teeth that were biting his fist. Crack, crunch, thud thud thud. The predator's teeth were shattered. Then at the same time, countless teeth began to guard against the Demon King. The hand that broke the teeth and came out. There was a clear teeth mark on that hand. I'm not here to fight. The Demon King shook his wounded hand and looked at Dana. Uma Wang's gaze, which had been flicking at his wounded hand, turned to Dan Peng. Even though he had spent the whole night nursing her, there was a wet towel on Yu-1's forehead. I have no intention of fighting, and I have no intention of losing to a little boy like you. Those teeth were certainly threatening. They were hard and sharp enough to wound his own body. To this extent, he would probably be able to chew anything in this tower. But even so, Uma Wang was confident that he would not lose to these things. Dan Peng before his eyes was not even a child, but a little girl who had not even lost her baby fat. Uma Wang didn't think he would lose to such a person. Of course, a bat. Regardless of Uma Wang's words, Dan Peng's words were no different from the beginning. I can't understand what you're saying, so it's frustrating. Uma Wang turned his head in embarrassment and saw thousands of teeth surrounding him. The guys who were threatening him. No, more precisely, one being. Since the purpose of the guy was clear, there was no need to fight any further. I'll just ask you one thing. Uma Wang raised both hands. A child needed to be talked to at eye level. Uma Wang raised his right hand. Is this guy your master? Or, then, raising his other left hand, Uma Wang tried to communicate with Dan Peng, who could not communicate. Food. It had been a long time since he had lost consciousness. As if he had fallen into a deep sleep, his consciousness, which had been asleep under the water for a long time, slowly rose to the surface. 2 hits. The last Wang was sincere. As if to say that he would no longer watch, he ran at him with a fierce look in his eyes. Head and abdomen, Wang lost consciousness in just 2 hits. At the last moment, he thought he had hit him once. You still don't have a chin. 2 contrasting impressions came to mind. The thought that it was still a long way off. And the thought that he had come this far. Still, he had managed to wound Wang's body. The body of a high ranker who had become sincere. An outstanding achievement. On the other hand, he also had doubts. Didn't he intend to kill me? His blurred vision gradually became clearer. Wang almost screamed at the face that came into his view. Are you awake? What's with that reaction? Wang was sitting on a chair next to the bed, looking at him. Wang sat on a chair next to the bed and looked at Wang, who had a wet towel on his forehead even though it was already the next day. And, phew, even Dana had come out. You must have had a hard time. You suddenly passed out. That's because of you. Wang frowned as he tried to get up. His head was spinning, his stomach ached, and his whole body was in pain. Wang shook his head at Wang's expression. Don't force yourself to get up and rest a little more. Resting is also training. At least you shouldn't be the one saying that. I apologize. His face was as gentle as ever. It was hard to believe that he had glared at him as if he was going to kill him and swung his fists at him before he lost consciousness. What kind of reaction was this? Why did you do that? Because of that guy. Wang's gaze turned to Dana. Ah bah, tilting his head, he walked towards Wang's face. Wang glanced at Dana, who was stretching his cheeks as if he was having fun, and asked in disbelief. Are you blaming this little guy? Well, that's how it looks on the outside. On the outside. At those words, Wang recalled Uranus's words. He looks small in your eyes. Dana looked different in Uranus's eyes. Maybe. How does this guy look in your eyes? This guy. Wang's gaze turned to Dana. Wang, who made eye contact with Dana, thought for a moment and answered. He looks like a dumpling. A dumpling, he's a cute guy. An unexpected answer. That was when Wang let out a small sigh as if disappointed. But that's not all there is to his appearance. Quote. He's quite ferocious. His teeth. Swish. Wang rolled up his sleeve. There was a sharp teeth mark near his wrist. What on earth had happened? Wang's gaze turned to Dana, who was still holding his cheek. He asked what had happened with his eyes, but he didn't understand what Wang meant. Of course, even if he did know, he wouldn't be able to understand the answer anyway. In the end, Wang had no choice but to ask Wang, even though it made him uncomfortable. Was that why you let me almost die? If it wasn't, that guy wouldn't have come out. It wasn't wrong. Wang recalled the first time Danpeng had reacted during his fight with Crisis. The first fight had been intense enough to make him lose consciousness. In that fight, Danpeng, who was still an egg, had revealed himself as a predator for the first time inside Wang. Was it because he was in danger of dying? The predator didn't appear when I was fighting the Outers. Danpeng is the same. But that guy had appeared during his fight with the Demon King. Is he not going to let me die? Wang's feelings grew complicated as he looked at Danpeng, who was stretching his body. He thought of the predator who had first shown his teeth to him. Did he really think of him as his master, or did he think of him as food? It wasn't easy to be sure which one it was. That was why Wang had worried about whether to break the egg or not when Danpeng was still inside it. But now, he had already hatched. If he thought of him not as his master but as his prey, it meant that he was carrying a time bomb that could explode at any moment. I needed to check it once. If it was a power that wouldn't be good for me to have, I would have to cut it off. Bah, 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 bah. At those words, Danpeng glared at the Demon King and shouted something. Perhaps the word, cut off, had bothered him quite a bit. However, the Demon King ignored him and asked Wang. What do you think? Wang knew more about the predator than the Demon King, at least. He had spent quite a bit of time with him now, and he was getting to know Danpeng little by little. And as time passed, Wang became certain. It was definitely a dangerous power to have. However, despite that, Wang needed Danpeng. High risk, high return. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Wang didn't have much time. What would happen during the set time, and what ending would come to this world? Wang had seen and experienced it all. That was why time, which might feel long and vague to someone else, approached Wang all too quickly and clearly. That was why Wu Wan needed Danpeng. Because of that, Wu Mian needed Dan Hong. A monster that eats the outer. An existence that is like the natural enemy of the outer. Also, a power that could eat them and make itself stronger. Wu Mian had gained hope due to Dan Hong's existence. Really, Wu Mian's answer made Wuma Wang hesitate for a moment, then he nodded his head. It is something you possess, so I will not say anything more. I have no intention of forcing you. Maybe that guy could save your life a few times. Creak, Wuma Wang got up from his seat. Come out once your body gets a bit better. It will be hard to move with your current body. Is there something else I need to do? Once my body is completely healed, aren't I going to go save Magne? Wuma Wang grabbed the door handle to go outside, then he turned his body. Our current forces aren't that great. Most of it is on me, and there are Magne's clones. It was true, most of the current forces were focused on Wuma Wang. No matter how great Sun Ogong's clones were, they couldn't compare to one Wuma Wang. They were still lacking in forces. Knowing that fact, Wu Mian could only nod his head. And you, are you talking about me? It would be good to replenish your forces as much as possible during the remaining time. And the one who can see results in a short period of time is you, the player, not the ranker. Right, right, Wu Mian looked up at the voice he heard from above his head. Honestly, isn't it true? You're the weakest out of all of us. Since when did this start? Sun Ogong had a cloud floating above Wu Mian's head, and he was floating in a half-lying down position. It's not like it's a bunk bed. Wu Mian sighed. Wuma Wang and Sun Ogong's first clone. They were great enough to receive help from. Results in a short period of time. Wu Mian met eyes with Sun Ogong's clone. There is a way. Even without that, his plan after arriving on the 50th floor wasn't just Sun Ogong's rescue. Rescuing Wuma Wang and Sun Ogong. Fighting against the heavenly realm. And, these eyes. Weruk. Wu Mian's eyes turned red. Wan, resonates. In those eyes, Sun Ogong's right eye, which was shining gold, was reflected. It's still only half, right? Chapter 223. If we're going to get something on the 50th floor, it'll probably be the Wan Golden Eyes. The next stage of the Wan. That's where I got my Wan Golden Eyes. I guess it's the most likely option. From the tutorial to the first floor, second floor, and up to the 50th floor. As we were deciding what to do on each floor, the topic of the 50th floor came up. What's the difference between the Wan and the Wan Golden Eyes? We've never used them before. The difference, it's huge. As the conversation turned to him, Sun Wukong answered in his usual meddlesome tone. The Wan is just a matter of having good eyes, or so I thought at first. Strictly speaking, the Wan wasn't that great of a skill for its rank. Being able to read your opponent's movements in advance and deal with them was a pretty decent advantage, but it wasn't something that would make it an A-rank skill or higher. But as my proficiency increased, I gradually started to see something different. I could see my opponent's movements in advance, and I could feel them. I could see the truth and the falsehood. Of course, Sun Wukong didn't find that strange. To him, the rank of a skill was just a label, nothing more or less. But as he fought Surtur in the tutorial and gained the Wan, and as he reached the 50th floor and gained the Wan Golden Eyes. These eyes aren't the final stage yet. Sun Wukong gradually came to know about those eyes. The Wan Golden Eyes are the stepping stone to the Eyes of Prophecy. Eyes of Prophecy, a skill that was said to have the power to see the future, a skill that was only passed down as a legend in the tower. When that skill was mentioned from Sun Wukong's mouth, the conference room was in an uproar for a moment. If Sun Wukong had acquired that skill, he might not have lost in the fight against the Outers. Of course, if that guy had gotten it, what difference would it have made? Yuyan looked up at the red sky and laughed. Sun Wukong. Despite being a top-ranked high ranker in the top 10, the guy wasn't very smart. He was smarter than anyone when it came to fighting, but outside of that, he was dumber than anyone. That's why Yuyan, not Sun Wukong, was chosen when it came to choosing the master of the clockwork. I already know the future, but even so, I still need the Eyes of Prophecy. No, rather, that's why he needed the Eyes of Prophecy even more. Rather, that's why foresight was even more necessary. I wonder how long they walked like that. No one had ever acquired this skill, so its exact effects were unknown, but it was clear that foresight gave Yi Jin the power to see the future. Wu Wan believed Sun Ogong's information. To be exact, he believed his senses that had almost reached Yi Jin after opening the Wan Jiamzheng. Foresight was definitely a real skill. Thud. Sun Ogong, who was walking ahead, turned his head. Can you handle it? Whoosh. The rock and ground where lava flowed. A place where even the sky turned red like fire due to the sweltering heat. This was a hellish place where even a high-ranking player could only stand. It's warm. Wan resists hellfire. Resistance successful. Of course, Wu Wan was not the type to give in to this. Of the many attributes Wu Wan possessed, the one with the highest resistance was fire. Not only did Wan have resistance, but Wu Wan also had considerable resistance to fire on his own. It's okay if it's just warm. Come on, you shouldn't have such a hard time with this. Sun Ogong walked ahead with a proud face. Sun Ogong's first clone. He was the strongest among the clones and, of course, the one who handled the power of the Wan Jiamzheng most freely. Wuma Wang did not follow. In the first place, this was a land abandoned by the heavens, and even with just Sun Ogong, there wouldn't be much danger. For now, it was more important for Wuma Wang to recover his body. Following behind Sun Ogong, Wu Wan sighed and looked around the scenery again. Hellfire. He had heard a lot of stories. A place with hot flowing lava that even rankers were reluctant to enter. That's why it was hard to find even one person there, and it was a place where criminals who committed serious crimes were imprisoned before a prison was built in heaven. But still, Wu Wan frowned as the sweat dripping from his forehead got into his eyes. It's quite hot. He thought he would be able to endure it if he just stepped into this place. In fact, it didn't feel hot. However, at some point, the flames pierced through Wu Wan's resistance and made him feel the heat. The sweat dripping from his forehead increased. Wu Wan eventually raised his magic power to protect his body. As they walked, the sweat dripping down his forehead increased. In the end, Wu Wan used his magical powers to protect his body. New Rim, Olympus, Asgard, Veda. How long did they walk like that? It's still here. Sun Wukong whistled at the sight in the distance. It was now a forsaken land, even in the heavenly realm, but traces of the past still remained. A giant iron cage, a long chain that was connected to the ground. A huge prison capable of holding tens of thousands of people stood in the middle of the plains, engulfed in flames. The Bagua Furnace Bagua Lu. The Bagua Lu, a prison in the heavenly realm where Sun Wukong was imprisoned for over 100 years. No, an execution ground for the worst criminals. A prison that drew the heat of hellfire into an indestructible cage. That's why the Bagua Lu wasn't just a simple prison. Long ago, it was used as an execution ground to imprison and kill criminals from the heavenly realm. Of course, the Bagua Lu's purpose was completely abolished a few thousand years ago, thanks to Sun Wukong. My main body survived inside there. I endured flames hotter than lava, inside a device that gathered the world's magical powers. Sun Wukong turned his head to look at Wu Wan. I got this eye during that process. Wan Jiamzheng's Wan could be obtained by fighting Surtur, the boss of the tutorial. However, it was here, in the Bagua Lu, that it was truly completed. That was the history of how Wan Jiamzheng was created. And Wu Wan was now faced with the situation of having to repeat that history. How is it? Think you can do it? I'll have to try. Thud. Without hesitation, Wu Wan walked towards the Bagua Lu. It was much further away than he had initially thought. It only seemed close because it was so large. The Bagua Lu felt like a large baseball stadium that could hold tens of thousands of spectators. You're quite pitiful, aren't you? He suddenly thought. This magnificent structure, built by who knows who, was abandoned because it failed to execute just one person, Sun Wukong. Well, Wu Wan chuckled at the thought that came to his mind. In peaceful times like these, its mere existence is an eyesore. The last 1,000 years. After the outbreak of the Gigantomachy and the Heavenly Realm War, the tower had been at peace for 1,000 years. Without any major incidents or wars, the Heavenly Realm was busy eating and getting fat. And it wasn't just the Heavenly Realm. And it wasn't just heaven. Yu Wan exhaled the hot flames that had entered deep into his lungs in an instant, and regained his senses. Murim, Olympus, Asgard, Veda. All guilds and worlds were the same. That's why they forgot. The fight that came at the end of a long peace could be as big a war as that long peace. Besides, Yu Wan reached out to the door leading into the Bagua Furnace. An executioner who can't kill people is no longer meaningful. Chi, a hot sensation was transmitted through the handle of the Bagua Furnace. Hot air was transmitted through the palm of his hand. In an instant, it felt like he was walking into a pit of fire. The moment this door opens, the fire that the Bagua Furnace had swallowed for a long time will swallow him. Damn, gulp. Yu Wan thought about what kind of guy Sun Ogong was. How did you survive in such a place? Creak. Yu Wan opened the door. Then, as expected, wah, a huge fire demon attacked Yu Wan. The first thing that felt the heat was his face. The moisture that covered the skin of his face dried up and twisted in an instant, and it felt like it was burning hot to the bone. Only then did Yu-won realize why the Bagua furnace was used as an execution ground, not just a simple prison. Fire shield resists the Bagua furnace. Resistance fails. Clothes of the four spirits resists the Bagua furnace. Resistance fails. Holy fire resists the Bagua furnace. Resistance partially fails. No skill or item could resist it. The flames of the Bagua furnace were so hot that the air outside, which was supposed to be a fiery hell, felt cool. I thought I was resistant to fire, though. Originally, Yu-won took 10 years to prepare for this test. 20 or 30 years if it took longer. However, he chose to take on the challenge right away, even if it meant pushing himself a little harder than he had expected, thanks to his faster than expected growth. With over 120 mana stats, over 100 stamina, and the holy fire skill. He thought he was resistant enough to fire. But, still, he couldn't afford to let his guard down. In spite of that, he couldn't let his guard down. And within that, the test that Sun Ogong had experienced, Yu-won was now beginning. In an instant, Yu-won exhaled the hot flames that had entered the depths of his lungs along with his breath, and he regained his senses. I can't lose here. If he were to lose in this calamity, let alone obtaining the Wan Golden Staff, he might end up dying here. Unlike Sun Ogong, I'm not immortal now. Sun Ogong, who had obtained an immortal body. The heavens, who had tried to kill Sun Ogong like that using the Paldic Tower, ultimately failed to kill Sun Ogong in the end. Rather, in the process, Sun Ogong absorbed the magical power of the Paldic Tower and obtained the Wan Golden Staff. Beginning the Paldic Tower test. Resist the flames of the Paldic Tower. 24 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. 24 hours. It was a dizzying amount of time just to look at. To endure 24 hours in this hot calamity. No, in reality, it'll be much longer than that. That was the problem. Was the Paldic Tower's test really a test that could only be overcome because Sun Ogong had an immortal body? Immortal power wasn't a power that could be obtained no matter how far back in time he went. Moreover, it was a power that would be useless in a fight against Outer in the first place, so there was no need to covet it and obtain it. How many days had Sun Ogong been trapped in the Paldic Tower? How many days was I trapped there? When asked how long he had been trapped in the Paldic Tower to obtain the Wan Golden Staff, Sun Ogong counted with his fingers and answered. I think I was trapped for 102 days. Thinking about it now, I wonder how I managed to do that because I was bored. Plus, I absolutely hate hot things. He hated hot things. He was talking about the calamity of the Paldic Tower, of all things. Even if he had eaten the entire half of the heavens, the heat of the Paldic Tower must have been quite painful. Perhaps because of Sun Ogong's evaluation, Yu-won had been looking at the Paldic Tower's flames with contempt. Because he had obtained the Wan and even the clothes of the four divine beasts. He thought that if Sun Ogong could do it, he could too. But, this is, crackle, roar. As time passed, Yu-won, whose whole body was bright red, muttered. It's a bit hard. Wan is reacting to the Paldic Tower. Sun Ogong, who had lost in the battle against the heavens and had been trapped in the Paldic Tower. And within it, the trial that Sun Ogong had experienced, Yu-won is starting it now. Chapter 224. Even if I obtained the power of the fire spirit, it would be impossible to last 100 days in there. You have passed the third trial of the 8 trigrams furnace. Starting the fourth trial of the 8 trigrams furnace. Resist the flames of the 8 trigrams furnace. Boom, this is what you call making matters worse. The flames of the 8 trigrams furnace grew stronger over time. As if they were determined to kill the sinner inside. Aren't you going to die like that? Don't talk to me. Yu-won, whose whole body was drenched in sweat, snapped at Son Goku, who was outside the iron bars. He felt like his body was more battered than ever. The feeling of being burned to death was one thing, but the feeling of all the moisture in his body being sucked out was unbearable. Why don't you give up? It looks like you're struggling. My main body succeeded. Well, your main body was invincible. Not invincible, immortal. That's why the test was easy. For Son Goku, the 8 trigrams furnace test was meaningless. Son Goku, who had become an immortal body that couldn't die in the first place, could have endured 100 or 1,000 days in the 8 trigrams furnace. Yu-won lasted about 3 days. But that alone was not enough to complete the fire spirit orb. It was an impossible challenge from the beginning. Son Goku's clone dissuaded Yu-won. He also knew that he was able to pass the test because his main body had an immortal body. That's why this test was a test that only Son Goku could pass. So give up now. Don't hold on to something that won't work. Who says it won't work? Just by looking at it. Your main body didn't know that. Son Goku, who met Yu-One's eyes, was startled. Yu-One's eyes were no different from the beginning, even though he was sweating all over his body and his body was completely dry and twisted. No, the clone is a little different. Rather, it had become hotter than before. Malice. There was no other way to explain it. Son Goku hesitated for a moment. He couldn't tell Yu-On, who had such eyes, to give up. Hoo! He let out a long breath again. The heat that had penetrated deep into his lungs was exhaled again. But for a moment, as he inhaled again, the heat of the 8 trigrams furnace penetrated his lungs again. My body is almost at its limit. Not only the lungs that inhale, but also the skin was covered with burns. No matter how great a body it was, it couldn't withstand such a long time in the 8 trigrams furnace. It was only because he had a high resistance to fire, but if he hadn't, his whole body would have turned black and burned to death a long time ago. But now that's the limit. It was time to use a different method from now on. But isn't that a test that only you can do? During the discussion about obtaining the fire spirit orb, it was Odin who asked the core of the test. The fire of the Bagua Road has no master. The Bagua Road was originally an execution ground that used the fire around it to execute sinners, so it is not a living being. Even if you have obtained the fire-controlling eyes, it would be impossible to endure 100 days in the Bagua Road. Right, it is not a place where you can just endure because you know the method. What, then, does that mean we have to give up? Everyone expressed their regret at the news that they would not be able to obtain the fire-controlling eyes. It was none other than the fire-controlling eyes. As Sun Ogong said, it was a path that could lead to the altar of prophecy, and a skill that represented the best of the best in the world. Failing to obtain such a skill would disrupt the plans they had made so far. We must obtain the altar of prophecy. No matter how much you know about the future, if you change the past, the future will naturally change. If that's the case, can't we find out through Mimir? The future that Mimir can see is limited. You cannot see the future you want, and the number of times is limited. Mimir's eyes were known to see into the future. It was the only thing that could be compared to Sun Ogong's fire-controlling eyes. However, even Mimir's eyes could not compare to the legendary altar of prophecy. That's why we have to obtain the altar of prophecy. And as the monkey said, the fire-controlling eyes are essential for that. As he spoke, Odin's gaze naturally turned to Sun Ogong, who was sitting in one corner of the conference room, yawning. Why aren't you interested again? Rather, Odin seemed interested in Sun Ogong's reaction. Whenever Sun Ogong reacted this way, he always had an answer. You won't have fire-controlling eyes by then anyway. Right. Wu Wan thought of Sun Ogong, who seemed to be really not interested in this topic, ignoring him. Then it's over. It's a bit difficult to say it's over, monkey. Wu Wan muttered, spitting out the word, monkey, which he only used when he was annoyed with Sun Ogong. However, Sun Ogong's advice was quite helpful. Thanks to him, he had been able to endure with evil energy so far, and he had been able to save enough magic power. Weruk. Red eyes flared up. Fire ignited in Wu Wan's eyes. Literally, fire-controlling eyes controls fire. The flames flickering inside the Bagua Road moved. No, it wasn't just the flames inside the Bagua Road. Fire-controlling eyes controls heat. Abnormal status. Burn has decreased to level 3. The heat of the Bagua Road that had filled his body seeped into Wu Wan's eyes. The heat that had been burning his body slowly disappeared, and the purified magic power remained intact. The heat that had tormented his whole body, including his lungs, disappeared. It was the power of the fire-controlling eyes. The fire-controlling eyes are the power to control fire. And that includes the heat that enters the body. Abnormal status. Burn has decreased to level 2. Abnormal status. Burn. The burn was healing. Moreover, Wu Wan no longer felt the fire of the Bagua Road as hot. The fire of Palkvero is without a master. Originally, Palkvero is a place of execution that draws in the surrounding fire and uses it to execute sinners, so it's not a living being. Waror. Yu Wan released all the magic power he had been conserving and moved Wan. And that's why it's not difficult to control the fire that doesn't have a master with Wan. From now on, Yu Wan, who had not moved a single step since entering Palkvero, rose from his seat. I am your master, Juk. The flames within Palkvero rippled with each step he took. And that's the way to shorten the time. The more proficient he became with Wan, the more Sun Ogong recalled the situation at that time. How could he withstand the flames within Palkvero? Sun Ogong found the answer in Wan. First, conserve your magic power. As much as you can, until you can endure it. At first, you probably won't be able to think straight. If you can control the fire of Palkvero using Wan, do you really need to do that? The test of Palkvero is meaningful even if you just endure it for a long time. You should also take the reward for the test itself. Why are you suddenly talking so smart? That's just who I am. It was just as Sun Ogong said, shrugging his shoulders. Magic power has increased by 1. The magic power of Palkvero that began to take hold in Wan. The fire energy that had been wandering without a master reacted to its first master. From now on, all Yuan had to do was use Wan to control the fire energy that filled Palkvero. Was this how Danpeng felt? He hadn't eaten a proper meal for quite a while, so his stomach was hungry, but he felt full without eating. The huge flames that filled Palkvero. At this moment, the flames looked more like a delicious meal than any banquet to Yuan. I will eat well. Outside Palkvero, Sun Ogong's clone was guarding the surroundings. He was lying down halfway on the somersault cloud. This is so boring, but it was fortunate. Yuan probably wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Well, he held on for quite a while. 4 days. Considering the time he had endured within Palkvero, it was an unexpectedly long time. At first, he didn't like it when Yuan said he would take the test of Palkvero. The test of Palkvero itself didn't have a great reward, and he thought it was impossible to pass. His body is already on the verge of burning away like a pile of ashes. Yuan's body, which had lost most of its moisture, looked like it could collapse at any moment. That's why Sun Ogong had been advising Yuan to give up for the past 3 days. A test that couldn't be passed in the first place. There was no death more pathetic than losing one's life to a futile challenge. If he could use Wan freely. Sun Ogong shook his head at the thought that came to mind. No way. The moment the second owner of the Wan Jiamjung was born. The heavenly horse in anger full cold it was an expression. He is whenever with a fist land smashed tomorrow blazing it was momentum. Blood Asura Black Flame Asura 1,000 horses to appease came out. Heavenly demon, calm down. Now be angry it's time no. Yes not, heavenly demon, but the heavenly horse to Asuras say listen did. He is still in anger swept up there was. That damn thing human this guy. The heavenly horse this grinded. I directly kill it weekend. The heavenly horse fist grabbed it. His from fist black energy bloomed. Blood Asura Black Flame Asura 1,000 horses to stop it did. But they of the heavenly devil strength stop it number there wasn't. The heavenly horse to Asura shake it off from now on went forward. Heavenly demon, wait for a sec wait. Blood Asura 1,000 horses to hold on did. But the heavenly horse Blood Asura's hand I shook it off. You guys to my ahead blocking are you going? The heavenly horse Blood Asura Black Flame Asura I glared. 2 Asuras of the heavenly devil look at me avoided. They of the heavenly devil anger how much is it scary? Well no there was. The heavenly horse 2 Asura shake it off from now on went forward. He is humans the village toward walked. That was the moment when the second owner of the fire ice system was born. Chapter 225. Warururu. The flames in the 8 trigrams blocked his vision. It wasn't hot anymore. Wu Jin used the fire eyes to continuously absorb the energy of the 8 trigrams, and instead made that power his own. Ba sack. A piece of dry meat with no moisture in his mouth came in. The jerky that had been in the inventory was completely burnt the moment it was taken out. You have passed the 21st test of the 8 trigrams. The 22nd test of the 8 trigrams begins. Resist the flames of the 8 trigrams. 24 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. The next test began. He ate the jerky that had been burnt like this, and it had been 22 days since he hadn't slept. He was now reaching his physical limits. I can't believe it, really. And Son Goku, who was looking at that figure curiously. He looked at Wu Jin for a while without saying anything, and then repeated the same words like a parrot. How did you do that? In Son Goku's eyes, Wu Jin's eyes were reflected. What was in front of his eyes was clearly the fire eyes that he had. Unlike the eyes of his own avatar, it was an eye that was even closer to the real thing. I keep telling you, my talent is a little different. Don't act like you're good. I'm not acting like I'm good. Wu Jin's answer was always the same. And every time, Son Goku wondered if there was a secret. Your talent is different. It was something that was hard to believe at face value. But, really, after hearing the same answer so many times, he couldn't help but believe it now. Thinking about it, it wasn't an unbelievable story. A player becomes stronger through stats, skills, and items through levels. And becoming stronger through those 3 conditions, and what kind of fight to use it for, were all part of the category of talent. And in that sense, Wu Jin's talent was beyond doubt. It was the same even if he went back to the past using the watch's hands. Believe me, Son Goku continued to disbelieve this, but to Wu Jin, it wasn't anything special. Because of that talent, I was chosen. It was an embarrassing story to tell from his own mouth, but it was the truth. The reason Wu Jin came back. It was because he was the last of the rankers gathered in that place to enter the tower, but he was strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. If only one person can go, Kim Wu Jin is the best. Odin, the reason he recommended Wu Jin more strongly than anyone else was one. That bastard will learn anything quickly. Son Goku was definitely strong. In terms of combat, he was born with a talent that surpassed Wu Jin. In fact, Wu Jin had almost never won against Son Goku, so naturally there were many who recommended Son Goku. But in the end, Wu Jin was the one who was chosen. Son Goku didn't have the talent to learn something. Son Goku didn't have many skills. Of course, he was able to use those few skills with almost 100% proficiency, but anyway, he wasn't talented in many ways. But it's definitely difficult, this. Wu Jin rubbed his eyes at the increasingly blurry vision. Fire Eyes resists the 8 trigrams. Resistance is successful. Fire Eyes controls the 8 trigrams. Proficiency is insufficient. The proficiency of Fire Eyes has increased by 0.01%. Wu Jin, who was using the Fire Eyes to control the flames of the 8 trigrams, felt that his limits were being reached. There was a limit to his magical power, and there was a limit to his concentration. Furthermore, he was so tired because he hadn't slept for so long. This is it, there was nothing more he could gain from the 8 trigrams. Putting the seal of the 8 diagrams to use was something that could be done gradually. There was no reason to stubbornly insist on the test of the 8 diagrams. If he were to lose consciousness here and end up dying in the fire of the 8 diagrams without being able to use the seal of the 8 diagrams, it would be nothing more than a dog's death. Creak. In the end, Wu Jin came out of the tea on the 22nd day, satisfied. If possible, he wanted to break Sun Ogong's record. But it was impossible for him to go beyond 100 days with his current abilities. You have passed the 21st test of the 8 diagrams. You have acquired the magic power of the 8 diagrams. Magic power has increased by 2. Fire attribute resistance has increased significantly. A reward for holding out for 22 days inside the 8 diagrams. It wasn't a bad reward. Although it had taken a lot of time, it was worth it if his magic stat had increased by 2. No, actually, it wasn't just 2. 3 magic powers obtained inside the 8 diagrams. And 2 final rewards. The magic power of the 8 diagrams that he had acquired through the seal of the 8 diagrams was as much as the final reward. So, in total, he had acquired 5 magic powers from this test of the 8 diagrams. In addition to that, there was another noticeable message. A significant increase in resistance. It was a message that was hard to believe even after seeing it. Not just an increase, but a significant increase. This is the first time I've seen such a message. The resistance of each attribute was a stat that was not shown visually. And usually, it was not easy to increase this kind of attribute resistance. However, not only had such attribute resistance increased, but it had also increased significantly. Perhaps this is an even better reward than the magic stat. There were many ways to increase the magic stat. He would be fighting the avatars in the future, so he could just eat them. In addition to that, Wu Jin had several ways to level up and increase his stats in his head. However, the same was not true for attribute resistance. Moreover, resistance to fire was a stat that Wu Jin could use quite usefully in the future. The preparations for Ragnarok have become much easier. In fact, Sun Ogong was known to have resistance to the fire attribute that could almost be called invincible. Wu Jin had thought that it was only resistance through the seal of the 8 diagrams, but it seemed that wasn't the case. And this kind of resistance would definitely be useful in the future, in the Great War of Asgard, Ragnarok. Whining. As he came out of the 8 diagrams, a hot wind blew. A land so hot that even rankers felt the heat, centered around the 8 diagrams. However, heat was inherently relative. It's cool. Wu Jin burst out laughing, surprised at his own words. His resistance to the fire attribute had increased significantly, and since he had come out of that hot pit of fire, this hot air felt cool. Wu Jin turned his head towards Sun Ogong, who was waiting outside the 8 diagrams. Can I ask you a favor? Sure. Poof. A pure white cloud appeared in front of Wu Jin. And the moment he saw it, Wu Jin's body relaxed. It had been a very deep sleep. Wu Jin, who always kept one eye open, ready for any situation, had fallen asleep without knowing how time passed for the first time in a long time. Time passed like that. Are you awake, Jaejor? Wu Jin, who had woken up from his sleep, met eyes with Wu Ma Wang, who was brewing tea in the room. How is your body? You shouldn't be asking me that. At the right words, Wu Jin nodded as he raised his upper body. He had asked because he was curious about how much Wu Ma Wang's body had recovered, but it was he who had lost consciousness and woken up. I'm fine, I'm not hurt. I know, you couldn't sleep for more than 20 days and were in that pit of fire, so it's natural to be sleepy. Click, Ma Wang, who had just handed the teapot to Wu Wan, gave the tea to Wu Wan. Drink it, it will clear your head and wake you up. Thank you. While Wu Wan received the teacup and drank it, Ma Wang began to pour another tea. My body is fine, it's almost recovered now. Almost, doesn't mean perfect, does it? It won't be long. Thud, thud, thud. The teacup that Wu Wan was holding trembled. Ma Wang's magic power began to rise in the room, beyond his control. The room where the two of them were, as well as the magic power, seeped into the ground and shook the atmosphere. Crack, aren't you a little too excited? As Wu Wan asked, looking at the cracked teacup, Ma Wang was startled and withdrew his magic power. I'm sorry, you don't have to apologize. Clack. Tea leaked out of the broken gap in the teacup. Wu Wan drank the hot tea in one gulp and placed the broken teacup on the side table next to the bed. Just be careful when you run. As I said before, you can only win this fight if you are in the best condition. I know, I'm not a kid, so don't worry too much. Wu Wan nodded at Ma Wang's answer. In fact, he wasn't that worried, he just said it in case. Ma Wang was so impatient that it was hard to control his temper, yet he was serving tea at home. He didn't think he would act rashly. I'm glad he's different from Sun Ogong in this way. Relieved by Ma Wang's answer, Wu Wan got up from the bed. Is it okay to move right away? It doesn't matter, I feel like I can fly after a good night's sleep. Really? Ma Wang turned his head and looked out the window. That guy seems to be waiting for you anyway. Yes. Creak. Wu Wan's eyes followed Ma Wang's gaze, and a golden aura swirled. Fire Eye Truth is activated. Fire Eye Truth resonates. Me too, I've heard the story, but it's amazing to see those eyes like this. Ma Wang looked at Wu Wan's Fire Eye Truth eyes with a curious expression. From outside, he could feel the gazes of countless Sun Ogongs. And among them, there was one that was revealing its presence to Wu Wan. Do you think you can handle it? Of course, you're a crazy guy, I'll leave it to you. Ma Wang said so and patted Wu Wan's shoulder. Wu Wan opened the door and went outside the cabin. Then, clatter, clatter, in step with Wu Wan's footsteps, one of the Sun Ogongs approached him. You said you knew my main body. He must have heard about Wu Wan from the 12th clone. Wu Wan nodded. The eyes he had gained this time weren't prophecy, but for some reason, he could clearly see what the clone in front of him was going to say. Then you know my personality well, I don't need to say much. The corners of Sun Ogong's mouth went up to his ears. He couldn't keep his body still, his shoulders shaking, his itchy hands clenched and unclenched, and his feet tapping. He couldn't contain his excitement. They definitely look alike. Wu Wan had seen Sun Ogong with that kind of expression so many times. Especially that guy. Whirl. Sun Ogong pulled out his Ruyi Jingu Bang from behind his back and twirled it around in one hand. I want to fight you. He pulled up the end of the Ruyi Jingu Bang towards Wu Wan, his fighting spirit rising. Let's have a match. Waruk. Sun Ogong's first clone. The strongest clone, challenged Wu Wan to a fight. Chapter 226. Of all the rankers Yuan knew, Sun Ogong had an unusually strange personality. Sometimes he seemed like a pervert. Sun Ogong enjoyed fighting as much as he enjoyed eating. Fighting, getting hit, what was so enjoyable about that? He's a good match for Asura in that regard. Asura and Sun Ogong. The two of them fought almost every day. Sun Ogong almost always won, but Asura wasn't pushed back much either. Asura was a genius when it came to fighting, just like Sun Ogong. The two of them loved to fight. Thinking about how tired he must have been, being stuck between the two of them, made him want to tear his hair out. However, it seemed like even his clones were the same. Boom! Yuan looked at Sun Ogong's back as he rode on the Kinto cloud. Sun Ogong's first clone. He knew that the personality of a clone would change slightly depending on the clone's number. Even the 12th Sun Ogong was quite different from the main body. But for some reason, the back that was filled with joy gave him the feeling that he was the real Sun Ogong. The closer it is to the first, the closer it is to the real thing. Yuan breathed out, suppressing the boiling magic power like an active volcano. How strong is it? He was quite expecting. How different was the first clone from the 12th clone? How close was the first Sun Ogong to the main body? The answer was about to come out soon. Thud. Sun Ogong landed lightly on the ground and looked at the wall in front of him. This is good enough, right? Swoosh. A black, hard wall. It was the farthest the Quinto cloud could go. This should be out of the heavenly realm's sight. We've come far. Half a day on the Quinto cloud. It felt like they had come really far. Sun Ogong's Quinto cloud had the speed to travel from one end of the world to the other in a day. We can go wild here. So don't worry too much. Whoosh. Show me your power. Sun Ogong's eyes lit up. For a moment, Yuan felt like Ragnarok had been recreated. But that was only for a moment. He's really serious. The illusion was only for a moment, and Yuan felt his shoulders being weighed down by Sun Ogong's magic power that surrounded him. This wasn't like the fire from the 8 trigrams. The Wan Jiamzheng that appeared in Sun Ogong's eyes put the magic power around Yuan under his control. He couldn't breathe, but Sun Ogong wasn't the only one with eyes. Wan Jiamzheng is resisting. Wan Jiamzheng. Bang! Magic power began to burn around Yuan as well. The magic power around the two of them was shaken by different powers. Yuan's eyes didn't lose to Sun Ogong's. No matter how long Sun Ogong had been using the Wan Jiamzheng, he was just a clone. Furthermore, Wu Wan did not just have one fire-fixing orb. Lord of Mana is activated. Dominance of fire-fixing orb increases. The fire-fixing orb possessed the power to control the magic power in the atmosphere. In addition, the Lord of Mana also gained dominance over Mana, giving it a similar effect to the fire-fixing orb. The two skills, which possessed similar powers, had a synergistic effect, and thanks to this, they were able to match Sun Ogong's fire-fixing orb. You use it well for something you just acquired. Sun Ogong no longer focused on the fire-fixing orb. The power that had been suffocating him disappeared. Wu Wan released the power he had been concentrating in his eyes and began to move his feet, just like Sun Ogong. Crunch. The two people walked towards each other at the same time. Willock. Sun Ogong twirled the as-you-wish cudgel in his hand. Skit. Wu Wan also drew his sword. There was no more fighting with their eyes. From now on, there was another way to use their eyes. Crunch. The distance narrowed, and that moment. Schwit. Zeke. Without a word, the two people ran towards each other. Goo. The as-you-wish cudgel and the sword clashed. Kwa clang. The ground was dug deep due to the collision, and a hole was made in the clouds above where the two people had collided. Sun Ogong's eyes flashed. Even though it was just one collision, it was enough to gauge the skill of his opponent. Look at this. He thought he would be quite strong, but he was beyond imagination. To be sure, according to the 12th clone, he had just been a rookie with the skills of a high ranker. How is he this fast? His growth rate was beyond imagination. He had no idea what his level or stats were. Boom. Sun Ogong swung the as-you-wish cudgel again. In Wu Wan's eyes, the as-you-wish cudgel looked like dozens in an instant. Bang, thud, thud, thud. The sword knocked away all the as-you-wish cudgels. Wu Wan focused on the end of the staff. There's not a single fake one. If a weapon suddenly increased to dozens like this, people usually tried to find the one real one. However, Wu Wan had fought Sun Ogong many times. Furthermore, unlike then, he now had the fire-fixing orb in his sensory field. I'll take them all. Shoo, thud, quote exclamation mark quote. The end of the as-you-wish cudgel pointed towards the sky. Sun Ogong's face was flustered. Wu Wan's sword stabbed towards Sun Ogong's neck. Quote. Wu Wan's sword tip was reflected in Sun Ogong's pupils. The sword, which had stopped in the air. Sun Ogong looked at Wu Wan as if to ask what he was doing. It would be inconvenient if you disappeared. The first clone was definitely similar to the main body. Not just his personality or disposition, but also his fighting style. Sun Ogong was not afraid of dying. No, in the first place, he believed in his own body, which was immortal. An undying body. Using those advantages that were no different from cheat keys, Sun Wukong's fighting style may have seemed ignorant at first glance, but it displayed the best efficiency that maximized those advantages. However, a doppelganger is different. Swish. Yu Wan turned his body away, putting away the sword that had been pointed at Sun Wukong's neck. A doppelganger that has received near-fatal damage disappears. Immortality is an advantage that only the main body has. And that was a fact that the Sun Wukong right before his eyes was overlooking. Don't ignore it too much. You've seen it, haven't you? It's much better than you think. Yeah, it definitely is. Sun Wukong scratched his head. Actually, he didn't think he was ignoring it. That was because the fact that he had thought about sticking to it from the beginning meant that he wasn't ignoring it. Yuan was already strong enough. More so than most high rankers. But that wasn't it. It's much sharper than I thought. Just now, Sun Wukong had missed Yuan's sword that had been stabbing at his neck for a moment. And that wasn't a movement that he had seen with the heavenly eye. He had clearly seen it as a slash, not a stab, but the sword had already reached near his Adam's apple. His pride was hurt. This was something that could only be described as having clearly lost in a sword fight. This is thrilling. The mana that had been wrapped around Sun Wukong's body began to boil. Rustle. Yuan became certain from Sun Wukong's trembling shoulders. It starts now. From now on, Sun Wukong would realize that he was a doppelganger, and he would fight with caution against Yuan's skills. Also, he probably won't give me space as easily as just now. As expected, creak, get bigger. The end of Sun Wukong's staff headed towards Yuan's head. As you wish. Thud. Boom. The ground shook, and the top of the mountain flew off. A mountain with a round hole pierced through it. And into the hole in the mountain, Sun Wukong chased after Yuan. Whoosh. Bang. The extended Rui Jingu bang slammed down on Yuan's head from a distance. Yuan's body, pushed by the force, flew away and was buried in the mountain with the hole. Rumble. Bang. Crackle. The mountain, which had been shaking dangerously from the shock of the Rui Jingu bang being swung, collapsed. Sun Wukong, who was looking down at the dizzying landslide that had occurred once, used the heavenly eye to search inside it. Where are you hiding? The differently colored eyeballs that rolled around, moving left and right. It was when those eyes moved for a moment to find Yuan. Flash. A blinding light. The moment Sun Wukong squinted his eyes for a moment, Yuan's sword flew towards him. Zeezing. Whoosh. This time, it was Sun Wukong's body that was pushed away. Distance was created, and at that moment, Heart of Oranos generates, lightning. Crackle. A black lightning bolt appeared in Yuan's hand. Get bigger. Whoosh. The moment the lightning bolt was thrown from Yuan's hand. As you wish. Thud. Clang. The Rui Jingu bang and the lightning clashed in the air. The lightning was concentrated on one point, and the Rui Jingu bang collided with it. At first glance, I was reminded of the clash between the lightning and the Rui Jingu bang that fell on Camelot. At that time, the doppelganger that had helped Wuan was unable to block the lightning, but this time it was different. Kung, Kururuer. The two forces that collided could not overcome each other, and they continued to struggle for a long time. And that's when it happened. Sun Ogong ran towards Wuan. Boo, Juk. Sun Ogong's fist hit his abdomen. Wuan's body staggered for a moment from the fist that was as hard as a rock. But that was only for a moment. Why didn't you dodge? Wuan, who had clearly thought he could dodge it, didn't dodge, and instead Sun Ogong paused for a moment. That moment, protection of the sea, is embedded in the body. Sun Ogong realized that the feeling transmitted to his fist was different from what he had expected. He thought the attack had gone in, but it hadn't. The fist did not go in, but was pulled in. Swept. Wuan's hand grabbed Sun Ogong's arm. And at that moment, a scene came to Sun Ogong's mind. Chet, pgggg. Sun Ogong gritted his teeth at the tingling electricity that pierced his whole body. It was a skill that had also shocked the Demon King. If he couldn't escape from this electric shock, he would lose the fight. Come back, shoo. The Rui Jingu bang returned to Sun Ogong's hand. Enduring the electric shock with his body, Sun Ogong pointed the end of the Rui Jingu bang at Wuan. Get lost. Wuan's eyes widened. In such a close distance, between that. Rui. Thud. The Rui Jingu bang shot up to the sky, sending Wuan and Sun Ogong up. Protection of the sea, is shaken. Huke. Wuan, who had climbed to the clouds, frowned at the shock coming from his chest. It felt like his ribs were broken. Even though he was surrounded by the protection of the sea, the Rui Jingu bang, which had flown in from such a close distance, was still too threatening. Moreover, Sun Ogong's attack was not over yet. Where? Blurred. Sun Ogong's figure appeared in Wuan's vision, who was using the Wan Jiamzheng. Not unfolded, a very short time later. Wuan's head turned back. And that moment, swept, Sun Ogong's hand grabbed Wuan's shoulder. You wouldn't. Yeah, that's right, a grinning mouth. The two people who had flown up on the Rui Jingu bang slowly began to fall down due to gravity. In addition to that, let's fall together. Sun Ogong began to charge toward the ground with Wuan, whose shoulder he was holding. Right, on the somersault cloud. Chapter 227. Guuuuuuuuuuuuuung. The ground shook, just for a moment. "Thud, what the heck, an earthquake?" muttered a man who opened the window and looked outside. The ground shook for a very short while. It was a bit concerning, but that was it. And quite a distance from there, at the end of the world, a deep pit was formed there. Gu. The pit was dozens of meters deep and so wide that it was hard to estimate its length. Thud, thud, thud. In the middle of it, Sun Wukong staggered to his feet. Sun Wukong held his head. Just like when the golden hoop tightened around his head in the past, a headache washed over him. He looked around and seemed to have figured out the reason. Whoa, this is crazy. This large pit was created when they fell down. The impact from the ground shaking was so great that it caused an earthquake. And the ones who created that impact were the two of them, Sun Wukong and Awan, who fell. What a hard head. Thud, 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 thud. Awan came out, pushing away the pile of rocks with his hand. I can't believe you fell headfirst. Ziing. It felt like there was a ringing sound coming from his head. Awan shook his head with dizziness and a tingling sensation ringing in his brain. You're the same, man horse. How are you not passed out after something like this? And the same went for Sun Wukong. The two shook their dizzy heads for a while. In the end, the two of them collapsed to the ground. If they continued to fight any longer, one of them would surely die or perish. Your body is hard too. You risked everything on that hard body of yours. Awan let out a hollow laugh. It had been a while since he had such an absurd fight. When the fight was in full swing, Sun Wukong risked his body to win. What else was I supposed to risk? What if you actually died? You're not even the main body. I did enough to not die. Don't worry, I don't believe you. He had planned to fall straight down with the added speed of the somersault cloud. He wondered how he had come up with this method. It was no different from dying together. Whether it was the main body or the clone, the ignorance was the same. Suddenly, Awan recalled the time he fought Sun Wukong long ago. They really are similar. Even though he knew it was a clone, it felt strangely similar to the main body. But the idea was good. If the one in front of him wasn't a clone, but the main body. If it was Sun Wukong with an even harder, immortal body, it was quite an effective way to fight. I should tell him about it later. Like that, a moment passed with them holding their heads. When the throbbing pain in his head, which felt like it was about to burst, subsided, Awan got up. Shall we go back? Let's go. Sun Wukong nodded. Like that, the two of them got back on the somersault cloud. After that day, Awan and Sun Wukong fought almost every day. Every other day. During those few days, Awan gradually mastered the use of the Wanjiamjung. The proficiency of the Wanjiamjung has increased by 0.07%. Getting used to something meant an increase in proficiency. And in the process, Awan was able to vaguely understand what Sun Wukong meant by precognition. For a very short while. The power to see one step ahead into the future. The Wan was an eye that could grasp the subtle flow of the opponent's muscles and movements. The Wan Jiamjung went a step further, possessing the power to actually see the future, one step ahead. That difference was considerable. Since they had the same eyes, the effect wasn't that great, but the power to foresee the future was quite helpful in his fight with Sun Ogong. With this, I can win a fight against an enemy I can't defeat. An opponent that he couldn't dare to overcome with his current skills. He thought that this power would make it possible to fight even against such an opponent. Thus, the training was about to ripen. Let's get started. One day, suddenly, these were the words that Wang uttered at the dinner table. Sun Ogong, who was eagerly tearing at the flesh of a deer he had caught in the mountains, raised his head. Really, why do you keep coming down here when I told you to stay up there? It's because of this guy. Sun Ogong shrugged as he looked at Wu Wan, who was eating with him. I'm watching over him. In other words, he meant that he was helping Wu Wan with his training. However, Wang, who had watched the two of them fight a few times, shook his head. The odds are about 50-50. You've lost more recently. Sun Ogong's shoulders trembled slightly. No, well, that's. Is your body all right? Sun Ogong, whose words had been cut off, turned his head and let out a sigh of relief. Wang threw the meat he was holding into the fire and replied. It's been a few days. I've been waiting just in case. You were cautious. I have to be cautious. To be perfect. Wang's gaze turned to the setting sun. The sky was red after the sunset. Wang, who was looking at the sky, opened his mouth in a slightly trembling voice. We move at daybreak. Wang's determined face was completely flushed, unlike when he first came out of prison. To save the youngest. Day broke. It was a strange feeling. It should have been tense, but it felt no different from usual. Rather, his head felt colder than usual. Outside the window, birds were singing. The cool air was coming into the room, and a cold breeze was blowing outside the covers. Perhaps because he had just woken up, it took a while for him to realize. He's here, up to here. The rest of the sentence didn't come out of his mouth. Even if he didn't say it, many words came to his mind. The 50th floor, and Sun Ogong's rescue. This was exactly one of Wu Won's goals. I'm halfway there. Rescuing Sun Ogong sooner was the most important of the many things planned for the future. Sun Ogong's track record was essential. He was the top-ranked high ranker with the best talent after Wu Won, no matter what anyone said. Moreover, the fight with the celestial world wouldn't have been possible in the first place without Sun Ogong. Chirp. At the sound of a bird chirping in his ear, Wu Won got out of bed and walked to the window. He's endured it for a long time. Sun Ogong sometimes told that story. How long he had been trapped in that suffocating pile of rocks. How dark, suffocating, and lonely it was inside. Sun Ogong looked the saddest when he told that story. He had rescued Uma Wong. Now, let's go save him. Next was Sun Ogong's turn. Ohang Mountain. The 50th floor where Sun Ogong was born and raised, the hardest rock mountain in the world. That place, which was strictly guarded even on normal days, had become a fortress like the celestial world in recent months. How many generals are there? The generals are the problem. There are more than 5 high rankers. And there's even the Yulong general. The celestial world's rankers were stationed all over Ohang Mountain. Their number reached into the hundreds. Many of them were high rankers, and even the celestial world's strongest force, the Yulong general, was there. Haven't the conflicts with the demon kings gotten worse recently? What about the celestial world? The grand general. The celestial world has the crown prince. What the hell is going on? Are they going to war? What the hell is going on? Is a war about to break out? I heard a rumor that the demon king escaped. The demon king, didn't he die in the last war? He's still on the rankings. The ranking management bureau must have judged that he's not dead yet. Even they make mistakes, don't they? How many times has that happened? Aside from Surtur, has it ever happened? Well, the heavenly soldiers stationed on Ogui Mountain were growing talkative with anxiety. The demon king had escaped. If that was true, it meant that the second heavenly war would break out again. The relationship between the demon king and Sun Ogong was known to all heavenly soldiers, as well as players within the tower. Furthermore, since the rumor had spread that the reason Sun Ogong was trapped on Ogui Mountain was to rescue the demon king, their fear of him had grown even greater. If the demon king came out into the world, he would surely try to rescue Sun Ogong as well. Have you found the demon king's location yet? Inside Ogui Mountain, in a cave. General Oranjingu was using some torches to light up a cave that had been used by mountain animals. It might have been shabby for a heavenly general to use, but it was not a bad place in the current environment. And inside it, the heavenly generals were gathered around. Yes, not yet, I apologize. There's no need to apologize. Since he hadn't expected an answer in the first place, General Oranjingu was not disappointed. If the demon king wants to hide, there's no way we'll be able to find him in the first place. He's the best warlock I know. Strangely enough, no trace of the demon king could be found anywhere. Even the heavens, who wielded immense influence on the 50th floor, had not been able to find a single trace of his magic power. So, are we just going to have to wait like this? General Oranjingu nodded at one of the general's questions. That's right, but let's not stop searching, just in case. Maybe he's just going to hide forever. No, as if it wasn't worth listening to any further, General Oranjingu cut him off uncharacteristically and replied. He'll definitely come. His voice was full of unwavering confidence. The other generals could not refute him. The meeting was not long. In fact, there was nothing to say. All the generals stationed on Ogui Mountain had to do was wait until the demon king made his move. Wah! After a long silence, one of the generals opened his mouth. His small yawn drew attention. He rolled his eyes around and carefully closed his mouth. No one blamed him. Everyone present knew that there was nothing to do. However, that did not mean that they could just let it slide that he was relaxing in a place like this. I apologize. General Oranjingu did not respond to his apology. The general hesitated for a moment in the quiet silence, then stood up and bowed his head. I apologize, General. General Oranjingu's hand went up. He wondered what was going on, but General Oranjingu covered his mouth with his finger. It was a gesture to be quiet. What the hell was going on? The cave, which had been quiet until just now, became so quiet that even the sound of breathing was barely audible. All that could be heard now was the sound of insects crawling around the cave. At that moment, he's here. Yes, what do you mean? General Oranjingu must have heard something, because he stood up and reached for the Enu sword next to him. No, he tried to reach for it. However, just then, General Oranjingu's hand, which had been reaching for the Enu sword, stopped. One number. General Oranjingu looked up at the ceiling of the cave. And at that moment, Ogui Mountain, where Sun Ogong was sealed, began to shake. Chapter 228. Guuuuuuuuung. Mount, Odi trembled. Sun Wukong, who was standing on the tip of the Ruyi Jingu Bang above the clouds, frowned. That's really damn tough. Didn't I tell you it wouldn't be easy? At the Horse King's words, Sun Wukong scratched his head. It didn't look that tough at first glance, you see. You have to release the spell first. That's your first goal. Yes, Buuuung, Chiok. The Ruyi Jingu Bang, which had shrunk again, entered Sun Wukong's hand. It looks like there are a few high rankers too. They're not ordinary, are they? Including General Iran, there are 6. One of them is Tak-Tap Qianwang. Tak-Tap, what's that? Sun Wukong tilted his head at the name he was hearing for the first time. He didn't remember well unless he was an opponent who fought him directly. He's the father of Prince Natha in the previous incarnation. Even though the level of the heavenly realm was generally low at that time, it's clear that his ranking was quite high. The previous incarnation, he's no match for his son, Prince Natha, but he's still a great warrior. Is that so? Sun Wukong's eyes sparkled. Then that guy's mine. Will you be okay? Will I do anything more than die anyway? I'm just an avatar, after all. It wasn't wrong. There was no such thing as death for an avatar. They were beings created by Sun Wukong, and their death was closer to annihilation than death. Still, don't overdo it. We have quite a few numbers on our side. Are you worried? Is this guy called Tak-Tap Qianwang that strong? He's strong. He's also a ranker who lived in the same era as me. The same era as your big brother. You're getting a little old. Are you making fun of me for being old now? Did it sound like that? I heard it properly. Sun Wukong chuckled. There was not the slightest bit of tension felt. This appearance was exactly the same as Sun Wukong's ontology, but this time, it couldn't be overlooked. If you let your guard down like that, you might end up in the grave with one blow. The Horse King continued, feeling the bustling movement under Mt. Odi. In the end, he hit a wall and couldn't go any further, but his ranking in the past was within the top 10. I'm more curious when I hear that. The Horse King shook his head at Sun Wukong's reaction. Of course, Sun Wukong was not careful enough to pay attention to such words. However, this is the time when this kind of personality is needed. This battle could never be lost. Numerous rankers, including General Iran, the Heavenly Realm's Grand General, were stationed here. The number alone was in the hundreds. In addition to that, there was an army of thousands, including players from the upper floors. It wasn't an easy fight. That's why you had to risk your life to win. Of course, it's all good, but individual actions are forbidden. Wu Wan was very anxious about Sun Wukong's impulsive personality. Keep your position and move. If one goes wrong, the whole thing goes wrong. Ah, yes. Sun Wukong scratched his head at Wu Wan's words. It felt like his brain was going to overload. The position that Wu Wan was talking about was something that had hardly existed in Sun Wukong's life so far. Are you sure you understand? Yes. What's so difficult about it? Because your head is so bad. I feel like fighting you first right now. We'll fight later. Don't talk nonsense now. The Horse King, who had subdued Sun Wukong with one word, looked at Mt. Odi, where the Heavenly Realm's army was gathered. Let's go. JJEOK. The two horns on his head rose higher. And that moment, GIIIIIIING. The surrounding scenery covering Mt. Odi turned completely black. They're coming. Saint, stop them. Numerous players covering Mt. Odi brandished their weapons and activated their skills. Monsters pouring in. In the world of the 50th floor, numerous monsters called yokai monster were swarming towards Mt. Odi. KKII, Kiak. UMMMMMMMMM. Giant ape monsters over 2 meters tall and a herd of bulls as big as small elephants. In an instant, Owangsan turned into a battlefield due to their charge. That's the magic of the Demon King. Don't fall for it. Where are you swinging your sword? There's nothing there. High-ranking rankers shouted at the players who were collapsing on their own while watching them flail around. A spell had suddenly unfolded around Owangsan, and the players who fell under the spell began to fight against invisible, imaginary enemies. Damn it, break the spell first. How do we do that? Don't we have any spellcasters on our side? We do, but our opponent is the Demon King. If we can't do it with magic, let's just break it with force. A black fog surrounded Owangsan. Anyone could tell that the fog was the medium of the spell. They had to clear this fog first in order to break the spell. Knowing this, the rankers began to clear the fog in order to save their subordinates. But then, boom, zong, the rankers who had been charging towards the fog were all repelled and sent flying into the walls of Owangsan. General Dongqian, Captain, the celestial soldiers hesitated as 10 rankers flew away powerlessly in an instant. And beyond the fog they had been running towards. Thud, it was a footstep that everyone could feel. A tall man with 2 large horns protruding from his head. He slowly walked towards the celestial army and opened his mouth towards them. If you stay there, you will all die. Koo-goo, koo-goo-goo. Shiver, shiver, the magical power that pressed down on their shoulders. Unable to move their bodies due to the heavy weight, the celestial soldiers knelt down in confusion. What kind of skill is this? It's not a skill. The general-level rankers shook their heads at the soldiers' bewilderment. He's just moving his magical power. Those who were as skilled as rankers could tell. This wasn't a special skill. The weight that was pressing down on their shoulders was nothing more than the weight of the magical power that the Demon King was spreading. The sworn brother of the great emperor of the first heaven. Just the 2 of them had fought a war against the celestial world, high rankers. Thud, as he approached, the weight pressing down on their shoulders also increased. I don't have much loyalty to the celestial world, so I suggest you step aside. Koo-dook, koo-dook. Step by step, the ground rose beneath the Demon King's feet, and the figure of a giant ox appeared behind him. Or else you'll all die. Gulped. For a moment, their breath was taken away by the enormous pressure. Block him. The celestial generals began to charge towards the Demon King. No, they tried to charge. Step back. A low, heavy voice. At that voice that quietly but resounded through the battlefield, the celestial army that was charging towards the Demon King stopped. Their gazes gathered in one place. At the same time, the soldiers who had found the owner of the voice parted to the left and right, creating a path. Thud, heavy footsteps. At the end of the path, the Demon King and General Iran stood facing each other. Long time no see, Great Emperor of the Flat Heavens. Great Emperor of the Flat Heavens. It was a title that the world used to honor the Demon King, just like the title Great Emperor of the First Heaven. Even though he was an enemy, General Iran did not disregard the Demon King. Rather, he respected him more than anyone else. Long time no see, little one. Little one, it seemed like a belittling way to address the great general of the heavens. However, General Iran did not seem to mind being called that. The Demon King before his eyes was a being who was worthy of such a title. A high ranker who was older than the history of the celestial world. Like the current Jade Emperor, he was one of the oldest high rankers from ancient times. His skills and the history of his body and mind qualified him to call himself a little one. However, your hands seem a bit light. The story was different now. The Demon King's empty hands. Originally, his main weapon, the hunchbacked cudgel, which was like Sun Wukong's Rui Jingu Bang, should have been in the place where his hands were. I left it behind because it was too cumbersome. It's too ugly of a weapon to use against a brat. Your weapon is currently being kept in the celestial world. Keep it well, I'll come back for it soon. Do you really have no intention of joining us? At Yulong General's offer, Wuma Wang's eyebrows twitched. I've heard those words so many times over the past 1,000 years, and I'm really sick of it. The reason why heaven kept Wuma Wang alive, it was to put him in the position of the next Grand General. Heaven became stronger and stronger as time went on. The position of the incarnation and the position of the Grand General were always replaced by stronger people. And Wuma Wang was a being who was not lacking in the position of Grand General of Heaven. If you come, I can give you the position of Grand General. Also, the authority of the Grand General and the full support of Heaven. I am the eldest brother of the great sage of the Heavenly Palace. Wuma Wang looked beyond Yulong General and continued, looking at Mount Wuxing where Sun Ogong was imprisoned. I, as I am, cannot join hands with Heaven. Must you really be like that? If you really need me, my demand is no different from before. Pung, Wuma Wang's fist hit his own palm. The neck of the Jade Emperor. That is my demand. Any further conversation would be meaningless. You realize that now, Suk. Yulong General took out the Sword of the Moon. The heavy weight of the Sword of the Moon was transmitted to his hand. Fortunately, the monster in front of him did not have the golden cudgel in his hand. Come on, Boong. Yulong General jumped up, the moment the tip of the Sword of the Moon pointed towards the sky. Kwang, the fog created by Wumawang was split in half. On the opposite side of Mount Wuxing, the soldiers of heaven trembled at the sound coming from the opposite side. Has the fight already started? With this level of magical power it seems to be the Grand General. Wow, really, the distance is this far. The flow of magical power from the clash between the Grand General and Wumawang was so intense that it made their bodies tingle even on the opposite side of the mountain. Inwardly, they were relieved that they were not involved in the fight, but they were also anxious that the fight between the high rankers, which was no different from a natural disaster, might spread here at any time. By the way, why did the Grand General give such an order? Even if a fight breaks out, he told us to stay put. What do you think he's thinking? Before the fight started, Yulong General sent a message to the soldiers through the player kit. He told them not to move, even if a fight broke out elsewhere. If it hadn't been for that message, they would have moved to help Yulong General according to the rules. And shortly after the fight started, Pachijik, Kurururur. A sound came from the clouds in the sky. Is it going to rain? Huh. What? The state of the clouds was unusual. In the meantime, bang, quarring, lightning struck down among the densely packed soldiers of heaven. Kwang, Og, what's going on? Lightning. Numerous soldiers who were caught in the lightning screamed and barely escaped the range, or the soldiers who were not caught were on the lookout for their surroundings. In case another enemy appeared. As expected, this is getting difficult. Yuan, who appeared with the lightning, sighed as he drew his sword. If Wumawang had drawn their attention and the soldiers moved to the other side, it would have been much easier for them to move. It's because of Yulong General. It's because of Yulong General. Because of Yulong General. A voice that echoed like an echo. Yuan nodded at the noisy sound and waved his hand as if to hurry. Let's go. Juk, Sun O Gongs. Chapter 229. Thud, the ground sank and the body of Yilangjingen, who had been embedded in it, wavered for a moment. But only for a moment. Rumble, Yilangjingen rose from his spot in the sunken ground, flicking the dust off his clothes. Was this your plan? Dozens of clones. Even the celestial realm was aware that Sun Wukong's clones were scattered throughout this tower. Knowing that their power was far from weak, the celestial realm had no choice but to ignore their existence. After all, they had no way of knowing where they were or how they were hiding. But now, so many of those clones had gathered together. They couldn't understand how or why this had happened. It's only been a month since I escaped from your prison. The Bull Demon King looked in the direction where Sun Wukong and Yuan were fighting, on the other side of MT. 5 elements. How could I have possibly gathered all those reckless guys together? Then, clang, Yilangjingen's grip tightened on the hilt of the Enuldo. Is it really Kim Yuan? You're wrong, you took a bit too long to answer. Yilangjingen spoke with a slightly bitter expression on his face. I guess it's him, he was a coveted talent. No. More than just being coveted, he felt that he might be able to entrust the future of the celestial realm to him. That was why he had hoped even more that he wouldn't be the cause of this situation. But it seemed that his hopes had been in vain. I cannot hand over the heavenly great sage. As if it was yours in the first place. He is the greatest sinner of the celestial realm. He is my irreplaceable younger brother. A red aura swirled in the Bull Demon King's eyes. Thud, unfurling his fists and cracking his knuckles, the Bull Demon King stepped towards Yilangjingen. If you get in my way, I'll snap your neck first. Thud, an even more overwhelming presence than before. In the face of that presence, Yilangjingen was finally able to recall another epithet that could be attached to the Bull Demon King. Great Strength King. Excluding Heracles, he was the high ranker with the greatest strength in the tower. And now, he was beginning to show off his power to the fullest. Get bigger, get bigger, get bigger. 3 Sun Wukongs aimed their Ruyi Bangs at the same time. At the sight of Sun Wukong's actions, the generals of the celestial realm stepped forward. Block it, it's the Ruyi Bang. Generals and soldiers rushed in, hundreds of them blocking the Ruyi Bangs with their weapons in hand. One of them, holding a hammer the size of a house, swung it at the approaching Ruyi Bang. Clang, screech, the weapons of the two collided, creating a deafening roar. The ranker who had deflected the Ruyi Bang puffed out his chest with pride and shouted. Even the heavenly great sage isn't all that. Long live General Bukchian. Wow, morale rose at the small victory. General Bukchian, who had deflected the Ruyi bang, grinned and twirled his hammer in the air. If I do well in this battle, my ranking will go up even more. And I might even get a promotion. But then, creak, the feeling in the hammer in his hand changed. The sensation in the hammer in his hand changed. Tak-Tap Qianwang stared fixedly at Yu-Won's face and grabbed the shaft of the spear he was carrying on his shoulder. The weight of the hammer that was gradually becoming lighter. Thud, thud, thud. The fragments of the shattered hammer fell down. It had just broken from the impact of blocking Sun Ogong's Ruyi Jingu bang. What the? The eyes of the bewildered Bukqian general shook. And at that moment, swish, screech, a vertical red line was drawn on Bukqian general's body. And that was the end. Boom, Bukqian general. Bukqian general in one blow. It's not Sun Ogong. Who the hell is this guy? Yu-Won, who had instantly dug into the battlefield, flicked the blood off his sword and looked around. He had already come quite deep inside. The Heavenly Realm's soldiers were unable to withstand Sun Ogong's offensive. What is this? Is it too easy? The first clone muttered as if he was bored, with the Ruyi Jingu bang over his shoulder. The fight was one-sided, more than he thought. Their forces were already dispersed. In addition, Yilang's engine, who could be considered the Heavenly Realm's best force, was being held back by Wu Ma Wang. The difference in power was too great from the beginning. Each of Sun Ogong's clones possessed power that reached high ranker. In addition, some of the higher-ranked clones had abilities that were as good as the top high rankers. With such an overwhelming difference in power, it was not difficult to break through this battlefield right away. Breaking the spell comes first. Don't focus too much on fighting. Ah, yes, the first clone nodded at Yu-Won's words, but didn't stop grumbling. You're not my mom, why are you nagging me? Fortunately, Sun Ogong listened to Yu-Won's words quite well. Thud, and in that complex battlefield, Yu-Won's and Sun Ogong's heads turned at the same time. They instantly realized who the key person was in this vast battlefield. He's giving me a hard time, even yelling like that. Is that Tak-Tap Qianwang? Probably, if it's not Yilang's engine. It felt too easy somehow. The Heavenly Realm would have known that Sun Ogong's clone and Wu Ma Wang had joined hands, so they couldn't have been reassured with just Yilang's engine. Tak-Tap Qianwang, he, who was the previous incarnation, was probably a ranker prepared to catch Wu Ma Wang with Yilang's engine. It is an honor to meet the famous great saint of the Heavenly Way. A hunchbacked old man. The old man, wearing blue armor made from the scales of a dragon, looked at Sun Ogong and Yu-Won in turn. There was one more person I didn't expect. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. As if he didn't care about small talk, he immediately raised his magical power. The path that didn't seem difficult to break through just a moment ago, felt like it was blocked in an instant. To save Sun Ogong, he had to reach the inside of Owangsan. And Tak-Tap Qianwang seemed to be determined to stop that, standing firmly in front of him. That guy is mine. Didn't you hear what I said earlier? You have something else to do. Damn it. Sun Ogong scratched his head irritably, as if he didn't like something. But that was only for a moment. I got it. Sun Ogong nodded obediently and walked towards Tak-Tap Qianwang. Thud, thud, the distance between the two gradually narrowed. And soon, Tak-Tap Qianwang and Sun Ogong crossed each other and Sun Ogong passed behind Tak-Tap Qianwang. You seem to be good at hiding too. Don't worry, I'll follow you soon. The two didn't look back at each other. Tak-Tap Qianwang kept his eyes on Yu-Won the whole time. Yu-Won approached Tak-Tap Qianwang. Around him, 3 Sun Ogongs clung to him. It seemed that the other Sun Ogongs also wanted to fight Tak-Tap Qianwang once. Yu-Won didn't bother to stop those Sun Ogongs. Because Tak-Tap Qianwang in front of him was an opponent that even he couldn't guarantee victory or defeat against right now. The Heavenly King of the Round Table before him was a being that himself could not guarantee victory against. Weren't your anchor? The Heavenly King of the Round Table gazed intently at Wu-Won's face and grabbed the shaft of the halberd he was carrying on his shoulder. I don't recognize you. Who are you? Do I really need to tell you? You seem young. You're rather curt with your speech. We're going to try to kill each other soon anyway, so why bother with niceties? That's true. Boong. The tip of the Heavenly King of the Round Table's spear stirred. Gik. A small wound appeared on Wu-Won's cheek. It wasn't a deep wound. It was so shallow that it didn't even bleed. It was a wound created by the tip of the Heavenly King of the Round Table's spear, which had crossed the distance. In that case, Waruk, Wu-Won Shuang Goldeneye emitted light. The Heavenly King of the Round Table had only moved his spearance. Buddha looked at Wu-Won with even more interest in his eyes than before. A good judgment. Is it because of those eyes? Just now. The heavenly king of the round tables amuvwasa technique at the thad cut through all of the places Wu Won had been standing, except for where he was now. If Wu Won had moved to avoid the spear, he would have left the only safe place. He's not an easy opponent. Through the Wyan golden eye, he could see the heavenly king of the round table's body at a glance. The flow of mana hidden within the armor. The flow was telling him. The heavenly king of the round table, he's dangerous. If you're a rancor I should be careful of in the heavenly realm. I know the Jade Emperor, General Yulong, and Prince Natada. Sonogong hadn't been much help when he'd asked about the heavenly realm. He didn't know much, since he hadn't created his own faction or bothered to think too deeply about things, and most of the information Sonogong knew was probably known by others as well. That's he. Odin had mentioned the heavenly king of the round table. The heavenly king of the round table, he'll bind the heavenly realm too. The heavenly king of the round table. He's not as great as those three I mentioned before. Still, everyone knows his name, right? I know the name, but didn't he retire? He did after the last Heavenly Realm War. That's why he's become a mostly forgotten rancor. A forgotten rancor. It meant a rancor who was still on the rankings but whose name was being forgotten due to a lack of noteworthy activity. The Heavenly King of the Round Table was exactly that. Long ago, when the Heavenly Realm was first established, he had been active, but since then he had left most of the work to Prince Natada and had lived in seclusion. And now, that Heavenly King of the Round Table was standing here to prevent the resurrection of the great Heavenly Saint. At the very least, he's as strong as Poseidon. In the first place, the author didn't send me here to fight my opponent. The Heavenly Realm didn't know about Wu Won's existence. He was only here to catch the Bull Demon King with General Yulong. One of the three gods, a rancor comparable to Poseidon. He, the avatar of the previous generation, was quite a difficult opponent for the current Wu Won. That's he. Kukung, Kukukung. The power of a giant fills your entire body. The power of a giant fills your right arm. You have partially succeeded in complete giantification. You have realized the right arm of a complete giant. Outwardly, nothing seemed different, but Wu Won's arm felt like a balloon that would burst if he poked it. And at the same time, an enormous power that he had never felt before surged through his right arm. Complete giantification. Wu Won was one step closer to the final stage of giantification that Heracles had mastered. The Wyan golden eye and giantification, heh, this is fun. As befitting a longtime rancor, the Heavenly King of the Round Table recognized the skills Wu Won had used at a glance. An unusual fellow to be my opponent. Perhaps thinking that any further conversation was a waste of time, the Heavenly King of the Round Table moved his spear again. And in that moment, swing, the Heavenly King of the Round Table's spear stabbed at Wu Won's head. Jung, the moment Wu Won's sword and the Heavenly King of the Round Table's spear clashed. Pajijijik, signs of a penalty began to appear on the body of the Heavenly King of the Round Table, who had stabbed his spear straight at Wu Won's head. The Heavenly King of the Round Table's eyes widened in surprise at the unexpected penalty signs. Are you not a rancor? Chapter 230, Clang. Yu Won's body was sent flying back. The same happened to Tak Tap Qianwang. He muttered with a bewildered expression. The system wouldn't lie, so you're really not a rancor. Tak Tap Qianwang looked at Yu Won with a hollow laugh. I see. Clank. The power transferred to his fist through the tip of his spear. You must be the player named Kim Yu Won. It seemed that even if he had been inactive, he wasn't completely unaware of the world's affairs. Currently, Yu Won's name was famous enough to be known by most rankers. Yu Won, who had been known as the strongest player in the lower floors, had now climbed up to quite a high floor. If he became a rancor, what would he be like? There were already many rankers who were curious about it, and there were also rankers who expected or feared the second coming of Qian Dizong. However, it seems I was mistaken. I thought you were a prospect, but it seems you've already blossomed and borne fruit. In Tak Tap Qianwang's eyes, Yu Won and Sun Wukong's clones were reflected. From now on, I will consider you an enemy of the heavens, like Qian Dizong. Boom. Yu Magwang's body was sent flying back after being hit by a new blade. Yu Magwang, who had landed on the ground and regained his balance, touched his chest with his hand. Blood was coming out. It wasn't fatal, but it wasn't a shallow wound either. You've grown quite a lot. You're too kind. Uran Jenkun got up from his seat while staggering. It wasn't just Yu Magwang who had been sent flying. Uran Jenkun had also been hit by Yu Magwang's fist and sent flying into the wall of Owang Mountain. My shoulder is dislocated. Thud. Uran Jenkun forcibly put his dislocated shoulder back in place. Sweat dripped from his forehead from the pain. Still, it was quite meaningful to have left a wound on Yu Magwang, who was right before his eyes. His body is still as hard as ever. It was the third time he had fought Yumagwang. He had fought countless fierce battles with Son Goku, but unlike Son Goku, who had grown rapidly, Yumagwang had been a monster since Aran Jenkun had first entered the heavens. Even though Son Goku now had a higher ranking, Yumagwang was clearly no less skilled than him. It's difficult to do this alone. That was why the heavens had sent Aran Jenkun and Tak-Tap Chianwang to capture Yumagwang. However, Tak-Tap Chianwang was currently being held elsewhere. A little more. Boom. Aran Jenkun's Enyu blade danced lightly. I'll go in strong. Tang. The shape of a dragon rose from the tip of the Enyu blade. Yumagwang raised his arm to block it instead of dodging. Screech. The arm that blocked the Enyu blade was wounded. His body, which had been strengthened by gathering magic power, was beginning to fail to block Aran Jenkun's Enyu blade. Drip, 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 drip. Sizzle, 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 sizzle. In an instant, the wounds on Yumagwang's body increased. You've changed your fighting style, not a bad idea. Up until just now, Aran Jenkun had been using the weight of the Enyu blade to unleash destructive spear techniques. In fact, each blow of the Enyu blade he swung contained a heavy force that could split a mountain. However, it was different now. It had become faster and sharper. The tip of his spear couldn't inflict fatal wounds on Yumagwang, but it continued to create small wounds. Furthermore, crack, zing, Aran Jenkun's cloak was torn by Yumagwang's hand, which he had stretched out. Aran Jenkun narrowly avoided his hand. And at that moment, the sword of the crescent moon flashed before the Demon King's eyes. Boom, a rather sharp spear tip. It was fast and intense. A storm seemed to be raging around the Demon King. No, in fact, it was. The Demon King looked at the storm raging around him. The rapidly approaching storm. The corners of the Demon King's mouth turned up as he watched it. You must be in a hurry. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Magical power filled the Demon King's hands. Such a light movement. At the same time, a fist stretched out in front of him. Bam! The power in his fist pierced through the storm that had been enveloping him. The figure of the heavenly warrior, hidden within it, was revealed, and the rapidly moving spear tip wavered. Bam! The Demon King's hand finally grabbed the heavenly warrior by the scruff of the neck. The body, lifted high into the sky, moved as lightly as a sheet of paper. Crash! Roar! The impact was so great that the ground shook as if an earthquake had occurred. The heavenly warrior's eyes rolled back in his head. For a brief moment, he felt as if his consciousness was slipping away. Thud! The heavenly warrior gritted his teeth. As he fell to the ground, he regained his fading consciousness and infused his magical power into the sword of the crescent moon. Crash! Bam! A fairly deep wound appeared on the Demon King's chest. The distance between the two widened. In the sunken ground below, the heavenly warrior did not collapse but stood firmly on his wobbly legs. It seems that the title of Great King is not just for show. Your spear has become quite sharp. The Demon King looked down at the cross-shaped wound on his chest. The heavenly warrior's power had certainly increased more than before. His strong willpower remained, and his ranking was much higher than when he had fought Sun Ogong thousands of years ago. Now that the diamond cudgel was gone, it seemed that it would not be easy to defeat the heavenly warrior before him. You intend to stand your ground. The Demon King realized what this action by the heavenly warrior meant. Why he had not called the great warrior of the altar here. Why he was standing alone before him. His intention was clear. This battle we will win. Click. The heavenly warrior did not deny those words and raised the sword of the crescent moon again. He would stall for time against the Demon King. It was never easy, but it was something the heavenly warrior was capable of doing. Have you called for reinforcements? There is more than one avatar of the great emperor of the heavenly palace. The heavenly warrior nodded. It was the obvious choice. The heavenly warrior had been calling for reinforcements since before this battle had even begun. He did not overestimate his own abilities. If his opponent was the Demon King and several of his avatars, he could not guarantee victory or defeat with his current strength. Even for you, it will not be easy to escape this place. That was why the heavenly warrior, instead of taking credit for himself, had asked the heavenly palace for more troops. And now, those heavenly palace troops were on their way here. I have no intention of escaping. Clomp. The Demon King approached the heavenly warrior. I intend to capture you here. What? The heavenly warrior's eyes widened. To capture him, his purpose was clearly to rescue Sun Ogong. And to do that, the Demon King had to go to Sun Ogong, who was trapped inside the Five Elements Mountain. Only the Demon King, who was also a warlock, could undo Sun Ogong's spell and rescue him. So, of course, he would have thought that he had no time to spare just a moment ago. And the heavenly warrior had aimed for that very point. But then, why, surely not, a thought popped into the heavenly warrior's head. Yilang Zhenjin's head turned back. He saw Wuxing Mountain, and beyond it, he sensed the presence of Sun Wukong's clones. It didn't take long for the guess to turn into certainty. And the corners of the Bull Demon King's mouth turned up as he noticed that thought. There are many ways to break a spell. You can destroy the object that serves as a medium, or you can use an object that produces an opposite effect to suppress the power. The Bull Demon King was the best in the tower when it came to spellcraft. As such, breaking the spell on Wuxing Mountain wasn't that difficult for him. And there was no rule that said that the Bull Demon King had to do it himself. The Heavenly River Great Formation might be broken while I'm doing this. Swish, Yilang Zhenjin turned his body. No, he tried to turn it. I have no intention of letting you go. Swish. Before he knew it, the Bull Demon King was blocking Yilang Zhenjin's path. Cold sweat dripped down Yilang Zhenjin's forehead. He thought it was the opposite. But the one who was being held back was him. Don't even think about escaping. The corners of the Bull Demon King's mouth turned up. Yilang Zhenjin is a cautious person. The previous night, Yu-Wan gathered Sun Wukong's clones and the Bull Demon King in one place, saying that he planned to rescue Sun Wukong. He is a person who cares more about the peace and safety of the heavens than making achievements, even though he is in the position of a general. Do you know Yilang Zhenjin well? Big bro, this guy says. Yu-Wan shut the mouth of the clone who spoke rashly. The Bull Demon King made a curious expression. Yu-Wan, who had shut Sun Wukong's mouth, opened his mouth again. No matter how many troops the heavens gather, Yilang Zhenjin will immediately call for backup as soon as he realizes that there's more than one clone. That's a possibility, because he's cautious. It's hard to expect Yilang Zhenjin to stick to his original plan, especially when there's a change of variables. Swish, Yu-Wan drew a circle on the floor. It was Wuxing Mountain. The clones will go this way. But Yilang Zhenjin will probably try to stop the Bull Demon King. He'll think that the youngest will be released if I go to Wuxing Mountain. Yes, then, should I go to the opposite side? No, swish, Yu-Wan drew a line a little distance away from Wuxing Mountain. The Bull Demon King must not cross this line. Why? The first thing we need to do is draw Yilang Zhenjin out of Wuxing Mountain. And probably, Yilang Zhenjin will move accordingly if you show yourself. Yu-Wan, who was drawing on the floor with a wooden stick, looked at the Bull Demon King. The only one who can stop you is Yilang Zhenjin on that side. And the only one among us who can deal with Yilang Zhenjin, who has been drawn out, is me. That's right, Yu-Wan's gaze turned to the first clone of Sun Wukong, who had fought him several times. Keep this in mind, our first goal is to rescue Sun Wukong. If that's not resolved, there is no second or third. He was a little worried. But, it wasn't easy to get through Yilang Zhenjin and rescue Sun Wukong, just like Yu-Wan said. He would succeed in the end, but the problem was time. It would be quite a difficult situation if the support from the heavens arrived before he could break through Yilang Zhenjin, who was standing firm like that. He's quite smart. He would lure Yilang Zhenjin using himself and rescue Sun Wukong in the meantime. It was the most likely plan for the Bull Demon King to hear. And as the plan went, the Bull Demon King succeeded in holding Yilang Zhenjin back. The first prerequisite for the first goal was a success. And the second task was out of his hands. Now, all you have to do is hold on. Rumble, he felt the flow and vibration of magic power from the other side of Wuxing Mountain. Yu-Wan and Takdap Heavenly King were fighting on the other side. Kim Yu-Wan, Chapter 231. Several paths appeared before Sun Ogong's eyes. Where is it? A complex maze that was difficult to find even with the eyes that used one Ahmgmjung. In the huge cave of Owang San, such divided paths appeared dozens, hundreds of times. He wanted to break them all and make a path, but he couldn't. My head really hurts. Swish, the complex maze of Owang San appeared in Sun Ogong's pupils as if he was looking at the palm of his hand. The path was difficult, but it wasn't impossible to find. You still have better eyes than me. The night before, in the place where the doppelgangers and Wu Ma Wang were gathered, Yu-Wan pointed to the first doppelganger and said, "That's why this is your role. Then what about me? Am I not fighting? It doesn't matter if you can just get through it. But I doubt that will be possible." Sun Ogong shook his head in disagreement. "No, you do it. Like I said before, this is a race against time. Finding the path and reaching the core of the spell as soon as possible. Yu-Wan gave himself that boring role. You have to do it." Really? He had to do this just because he had won Ahmgyeomjang. It couldn't be helped that he was disappointed, as he had been looking forward to fighting the heavenly realm. There are two ways to break the seal. Once it was decided who would break the seal, Wu Ma Wang talked about how to break the seal. The first way is to destroy the spell that is spread throughout Owangssan. And that is something only I can do. If there's a first, does that mean there's a second? As Sun Ogong asked as if he had given up, Wu Ma Wang nodded and smiled. The second way is to find the core of the spell and cast a spell that is the opposite of that spell. The conditions are necessary, but if those conditions are met, this one is much easier. Why is that? The core of the spell is often small and relatively weak, like a talisman or a bead. Because of that, it tends to shake more easily than you think, and it becomes weaker even with a small shock. Swish! Sun Ogong took out a yellow talisman that he had put in his arms. Really? Does this thing have that kind of power? Sniff sniff. He took a whiff and detected the scent of mana. However, it was still unclear whether this thin and flimsy piece of paper could actually release the spell that imprisoned the main body. Well, Sun Wukong, who had stopped for a moment, folded his complicated thoughts and began to move again, searching for a path. I said you don't need to release it all. KWAUUK. Tak Dapcheongwang's spear sliced Yu-Won's body in half. This time for sure, he thought. Yu-Won's body turned into lightning and disappeared from that spot. Pajijik. Yu-Won appeared a few steps away and hurriedly regained his lost balance. Tak Dapcheongwang frowned as he looked at Yu-Won, who had widened the distance once again. You dodge well, like a loach. KWAUUK. Tak Dapcheongwang's spear didn't rest as he spoke. Yu-Won dodged the spear this time as well. Through the Wanjiamjung, he could clearly see the path Tak Dapcheongwang's spear would move. Not only that, I see it, he could also clearly see where he needed to swing his sword. Shuik, he stabbed his sword towards a single point that he saw. Zung, Tak Dapcheongwang, who had hastily blocked the sword, stumbled backward in surprise. For a moment, he felt a threat that could have pierced his head if he had made a slight mistake. This is embarrassing. Tuck, tuck. Tak Dapcheongwang tapped his crooked back with the back of his hand and looked into Yu-Won's eyes. Those eyes, they're very annoying. Yu-Won's movements were strange. It was clear that he wasn't that fast, but he felt like he was moving as if he knew his movements in advance. Tak Dapcheongwang realized that it was one of the abilities of the Wanjiamjung. At that moment, as Tak Dapcheongwang found Yu-Won's movements bothersome, Yu-Won was concentrating more than ever on every sensation in his body, without missing a single moment of the tip of Tak Dapcheongwang's spear. I can keep up with him. A high ranker within the top 100. He was clearly following the movements of the high ranker who was near the top of the tower. It was true that he was still lacking compared to the past. However, it was also true that it was a considerable achievement. I thought it would be a success if I could reach the low 500s at this point when I obtained the Wanjiamjung. KWAAK. Still, Tak Dapcheongwang was trying to pull Yu-Won, who intended to commit Suchesan, into their bosom. It was quite rewarding to have someone who would test its performance right before its eyes. Of course, a head-on fight is still impossible, though. Tak Dapcheongwang and Yu-Won Schwarzwuril they could dodge the attacks using the power of the Wangkumjung in the Zensori territory, and Teo fill in the lacking power with the Jontification power. Although they counterattacked once in a while, like they did just now, it was nothing more than a rare occurrence. Are you going to keep dodging? And knowing that fact, Tak Dapcheongwang made a puzzled expression. If they continued like this, he would eventually have no choice but to win, and Yu-Won must have known that. Does it look like that? Kurururu. The sound of thunder could be heard from the sky. Tak Dapcheongwang's head tilted upward. Then I guess I was wrong. Flash. A bright yellow light exploded in the sky. At the same time, Tak Dapcheongwang is spearheaded upward. Wyrick, Wuriririk, crackle, crackle. The lightning that fell above Tak Dapcheongwang's head was blocked with their revolving spear. Tak Dapcheongwang, who wrapped the lightning around his spear, grabbed it with both hands and swung it. Quirang. The force of the lightning was directed back to Yu-Won. Yu-Won extended the heart of Uranus forward and swallowed the lightning again. It was a great move in his opinion, but Yu-Won's heart sank when it was blocked so easily. This won't work, Tak Dapcheongwang was alarmed. There was a rumor that he was the teacher of Aranjingu, and the two had some similarities. Similar spearmanship with a spear as their main weapon, and a solid body. He was a ranker who had reached this point with only his body and a spear as his weapon, without any special skills. You have a unique talent. Is that the power of Zeus? As befitting an ancient high ranker, Tak Dapcheongwang had learned where Yu-Won's abilities came from. And every time he peeled back his abilities like an onion, his curiosity for Yuan grew. How about you work with us in heaven? If you do, I'll ask the Jade Emperor to pardon you for this. The same offer as Aranjingu. Trying to rescue the great saint of the heavenly way, who was a great sinner of heaven, was no different from starting the heavenly war again. And yet, Tak-Tap Chianwang was trying to attract Yuan, who was about to commit such a sin, into their fold. That meant Yuan was coveted. I refuse. Won't you reconsider? It's a suggestion I've heard several times. There's no reason for the answer to be different this time. Really? Tak-Tap Chianwang stroked his chin and looked at Yuan with strange eyes. You reject the offer from the heavens, and you try to save Jekyandisung, a great sinner against the heavens. That's strange, no matter how you look at it. It was certainly a strange behavior. Refusing the offer from a large guild and trying to save Jekyandisung, the lord of that large guild. It was an action that could not be taken without a personal acquaintance. Are you perhaps Jekyandisung's successor? It is suspicious. Thoughts are free. I don't know what secrets you have, but it's definitely a talent. That's a pity to die in a place like this. Thud. Tak-Tap Chianwang struck the spear he was holding in his hand on the floor and looked at Yuan. If you are not Jekyandisung's successor, no, even if that's true, how about stopping here? I'm saying this because I'm worried about you. There's no need to worry. We're not that close. Support will soon arrive from the heavens. Tak-Tap Chianwang's gaze went up. Pyunchian Daesung and those clones alone will be difficult. Wuma Wang didn't have Hanqian Kun, and Sun Ogon was not the main body but a clone. No matter how great the two of them were, they were far from their combat power when they fought against the heavens in the past. Time is on our side. So it would be better not to be too stubborn. Tak-Tap Chianwang's eyes narrowed and he looked at Yuan again as if threatening him. What do you think? ... Even now, Tak-Tap Chianwang was blocking the clones, and Aran Jin Gun was holding Wuma Wang. If the generals of the heavens, or major forces like Natata Prince, arrive here, then, this battle will end easily. Time is on your side. The corners of Yuan's lips went up slightly. Well, let's see. Yuan's gaze turned behind Tak-Tap Chianwang. A high mountain rising through the clouds. By now, Sun Ogong's clone heading towards the inside of Ohang Mountain would be moving. And so, as the two of them paused their fight for a moment to talk. Rumble, rumble, whoosh, above the Five Elements mountain. The blue sky began to shake and small cracks began to form. Naturally, the two of them looked up. Looks like they've finally arrived. Creak, the cracks grew larger in an instant. Between the widening cracks, soldiers of the heavenly realm riding in heavenly realm chariots began to appear. The players of the heavenly realm. And the rankers. And among them, creepy. There was a creepy murderous aura that seemed to weigh down on the body just by standing there. Faster than I thought. I thought it would take at least 30 minutes, or at most an hour, for the heavenly realm to arrive after your engine requested support. But it seemed that the heavenly realm was also fully prepared. Exactly 30 minutes. The support of the heavenly realm arrived right on time, as expected by Yuan and everyone else. It's not too late yet. Tak-Tap King of Heaven still seemed to have some affection for Yuan. As you can see, this fight is already over. Do you think you can win against that many troops? Creak, crack, the cracks continued to widen at this moment. An army of thousands. No matter how many players and rankers the heavenly realm had, it was rare for such a force to gather. The heavenly realm still doesn't know about your existence. Repent and repent now. Reflect, repent. What should I reflect on and repent for? It was an incomprehensible statement, but Yuan knew this way of thinking of the heavenly realm quite well. The heavenly realm is justice, and those who oppose it are evil. Their evil and justice were so simple. And it seemed that Tak-Tap King of Heaven in front of him was no different. Otherwise, you will probably die in a way that you don't even want to imagine. Roar rrrr. In one of the cracks, Yuan and Tak-Tap King of Heaven looked at a man with copper-colored skin who began to walk out of the same crack. He's my son, but that guy is really crazy. Tak-Tap King of Heaven's son. The heavenly realm's greatest weapon that destroys the enemies of the heavenly realm. The appearance of the god of war, Prince Nezha. His appearance meant the outbreak of the heavenly realm war. Chapter 232. 1300 years ago, after the retreat of the Yilangjan army, Prince Natata, leading the army of heaven, visited Chiante Dizong, who had settled in Wagasan. Are you the monkey? I was sleeping so well. Sun Wukong, who had been taking a nap while looking up at the sky, opened his eyes. Sun Wukong, who had placed his thin and long Rui Bang next to him, raised his upper body and looked at the man with thick copper-colored skin. As the word, monkey, Trendy these days. Why does everyone call me a monkey out of nowhere? Sun Wukong's eyes, looking at Prince Natada, sparkled with interest rather than displeasure. That's what they say in heaven. They say there's a monkey causing trouble in heaven these days. Ah, is that why? Somehow, creak, Sun Wukong got up from his seat, scraping the Ruyi Bang on the floor. But are you by any chance a Tucson? You look a bit strong. I heard the general lost to you. The general, that handsome guy. Buzz, bang, Sun Wukong walked towards Prince Natada while twirling the Ruyi Bang in his hand. It's good to have a lot of funny guys, but aren't you being too persistent? Just because I ate some fruit. Not some fruit, but a half peach. You don't even know the value of the treasure you ate, yet you speak so lightly. Sun Wukong became an enemy of heaven because he stole and ate all the treasures they had, including the half peach. Of course, Sun Wukong had considered heaven as his enemy even before that. It was after Bano One was devastated that heaven began to properly remember the name, Sun Wukong. Well, it must have been a treasure to you guys. Buzz, bang, but I had my own treasure. Sun Wukong, who had been playing with the Ruyi Bang in his hand, pointed the end of the staff at Prince Natada. Get bigger, and that was the signal. Ruyi. Thump, the war between Sun Wukong and heaven. The beginning of the First Heavenly War. Prince Natada looked down at the battlefield below. Familiar faces fighting against the soldiers of heaven. Sun Wukong's clones were running wild on the battlefield. Flies. Prince Natada had already killed several clones in the past 1,000 years since Sun Wukong was sealed in Owangshan. However, there was no opponent that satisfied Prince Natada in the process. The clones were just clones, and they couldn't compare to the main body. Then, he noticed one of them. Swish, Yu-1 and Prince Natada's eyes met. And the moment their eyes met, those are the eyes of that monkey. Sharp, his eyes stung strangely, a long scar running from his right eye to his chin. The scar seemed to tremble. Who was that guy? It seems to be a player named Kim Yu-1. Kim Yu-1, you don't have to worry too much. He's a promising player, but he's not worth your attention yet. No, Prince Natada, who had found Yu-1, began to walk. That guy is the center of this battlefield. Step. At Prince Natada's footsteps, his aide looked at Yu-1 again. The center. Although it couldn't compare to the Heavenly War 1200 years ago, this battle was a battle that would go down in the history of heaven. The escape of Pyeongcheon Dizong and the combined forces of Cheontae Dizong's clones. The battlefield that included the general and Tucson because of them. Although small in scale, this battle was a battle worthy of being called a heavenly war. But the center of such a battlefield is that small player. Why did Tucson make such a judgment? Kuwu, Prince Natada, who had jumped down, landed on the ground. The battlefield shook with his landing. Takdap Qianwang shook his head at the sight of Yu-1's back, who had been watching him all along. It seems to be too late. There was not an ounce of affection in his eyes as he looked at his son. My hand is already gone. I must leave this battlefield. The great heavenly king of the firmament did not seem interested in this fight anymore. There was one reason, that guy will wipe them all out anyway. The existence of the crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom, who appeared before Yu-1. With his appearance, he decided that this fight no longer had any meaning. Thud, and Yu-1 thought the same. The boss of this battlefield has come. The appearance of the crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom. He was the worst possible enemy in this fight. The task that had to be solved had changed from now on. Surviving from that monster, Sun Ogong and the others, who realized this fact, also gathered around Yu-1. Nice to meet you, monkeys. The crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom looked around at the doppelgangers of Sun Ogong gathered around him. His eyes were expressionless. He didn't seem to be interested in the doppelgangers at all. You don't even greet your father when he's right in front of you. At the great heavenly king of the firmament scolding, the crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom turned his head to him. He looked puzzled and looked at the great heavenly king of the firmament and Yu-1 alternately. Didn't you retire? It was an order directly from the heavenly emperor. I couldn't refuse. Leave this battlefield to me now. Do I need your permission? I will step down, meaning it wasn't necessary. And it was true. He was called the incarnation of the previous generation, but the current incarnation of the heavenly world was the crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom. He was the sword that cut down the enemies of the heavenly world, and he had the authority comparable to a general on the battlefield. Even the great heavenly king of the firmament, who was the incarnation of the previous generation, had no choice but to step back if it was the crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom's order. Furthermore, he wasn't the type to yield just because he was his father. Hey, crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom. Hey, crown prince of the Na-Ta kingdom. Hey, Crown Prince! The doppelgangers of Sun Ogong surrounding the Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom all pointed their Rui Jingu bangs at him at once. Get bigger, get bigger, Jay! Rui Jingu bangs aimed from all directions. The Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom, who was looking at them, took out a bead from his arms and held it in his hand. And that moment, Rui, thud, as if they had made a promise, the Rui Jingu bangs of Sun Ogong and the others extended simultaneously, centering on the Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom. We're, zing. A solid metallic sound spread to the sky. Not a single one of the dozens of Rui Jingu bangs reached the Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom. Wang. Small beads floated around the Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom. Each of them floated in the air, blocking the Rui Jingu bangs. The embroidered ball, Su Jiyu. One of the 6 weapons wielded by the Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom. Dozens of beads floated around the Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom, becoming both his weapon and shield. Crack. Cracks appeared in the dozens of Rui Jingu bangs. The cracks spread in an instant. The Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom's embroidered balls did not stop at blocking the Rui Jingu bangs and dug into the Rui Jingu bangs, breaking them from the inside. Crash! The Rui Jingu bangs were broken. Although they were empty-handed, the doppelgangers of Sun Ogong did not hesitate. Whoosh! The Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom turned his head toward Sun Ogong and the others, who were running with their bare hands. That guy is a monkey, but... Under his disappointed gaze. Screech. The beads that had returned around him in the meantime rotated rapidly. You guys are like flies. Splat, 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 splat. Puawag. Holes were pierced in the heads of the doppelgangers of Sun Ogong. Some of the doppelgangers noticed the movement of the embroidered balls and avoided them, but about half of the doppelgangers collapsed on the spot as if they had been shot in the head. Thud, thud, thud. Swish. The doppelgangers disappeared. Yu-Won looked at it and stuck out his tongue. Just like Asura. The Crown Prince of the Nata Kingdom. He had a similar vibe to the Asura that Yu-Won knew. He was a battle-crazed demon, and there was no hesitation or mercy in his use of his hands. Half of the doppelgangers were wiped out in an instant. The prince looked at Wu-Won again, having lost interest in the clones that were blocking his way once more. Are you a bit different? Having heard rumors about Wu-Won, the prince seemed to be showing more interest in Wu-Won than the clones of Sun Ogong. Perhaps he thought Wu-Won was hiding something more. However, Wu-Won shook his head at the question. I'm not that different, compared to you. It was true, at least Wu-Won had better skills than the clones of Sun Ogong that were here. Perhaps he would be able to avoid getting caught if they actually fought. But that was it. To the eyes of a human, ants are larger, ants are just bugs. He might be able to struggle a bit more, but there was no chance that Wu-Won would be able to defeat the prince. And the prince knew that too. However, but why aren't you afraid of me? The prince wondered why Wu-Won wasn't afraid of him. There were 2 reactions from someone facing death. Being afraid or resigned. He had lived for quite a long time, but he had never seen anything else besides those 2. And Wu-Won, who was right before his eyes, was neither of those 2. Surely you haven't given up yet. If that were the case, it would be strange. Wu-Won definitely knew that he was no match for him. Seeing the clones die in an instant, he shouldn't have any will to fight. Because I'm not going to fight you anyway. Do you plan to run away? As if to say he wouldn't let that happen, the prince stretched out his hand and spread his sphere widely. So that he could catch him no matter where he ran. In an instant, the prince had the entire range of this vast battlefield under his control. I won't run away. Wu-Won turned his head and looked at the top of Ohang Mountain. Instead, the guy who's going to fight you is about to come out now. The guy who's going to fight me, who is? Wu-Won's lips curled up. He was smiling. Even though he was in a situation where begging for his life wouldn't be enough, this wasn't the kind of expression he should be making. Something's up. The prince's gaze followed Wu-Won as his expression changed. And that moment, rumble, rumble, rumble. Ohang Mountain, which had been quietly asleep until now, began to shake slowly. Wow, that was close. It was slow to go off. Wu-Won finally felt relieved and let out a sigh of relief. He really thought something was going to happen this time. The heavenly army arrived at the earliest time he had expected, and the worst-case scenario, the prince, was among them. Also, Sun Ogong's resurrection was a little later than expected. But still, it's a good thing. The shaking felt from Ohang Mountain. A huge being that had been hiding inside it began to stir. It's not too late. The prince's pupils shook as he looked at the shaking Ohang Mountain. Throb, throb. The scar under his eye was throbbing in increasing pain. At first, he thought the pain was because of Wu-Won, who had the same eyes as Sun Ogong. But that wasn't it. Throb, son, the reason why the wound under his eye was throbbing in pain now. Oh Gong, it was because of the being who had created that scar. He looked at Wu Wan, the high ranker who had been buried in that huge mountain, whom even the heavens couldn't kill and had only been able to seal away. The great sage, heaven's equal. The being who dared to stand in the same place as the heavens and declared it, and who had it recognized. Rumble, Wan Jiamjung, resonates. The great sage, heaven's equal, is looking at you. He had now awakened from his long seal. Chapter 233. Prince Natada passed by Yuan. You're here. Sun Ogong's lips curled up. He could feel the presence of the bull demon king outside of Oganyo Mountain, which had been quiet for over 1,000 years. He could also feel a huge battle going on outside. The Yilang Celestial Army. The Yilang Celestial Army and the Bull Demon King. Normally, the Bull Demon King shouldn't have been pushed back. But if Sun Ogong's memories were correct, the Bull Demon King was empty-handed right now. A bothersome opponent. As expected, the battle between the Bull Demon King and the Yilang Celestial Army had been going on for quite a while. His body twitched. He wanted to jump out and fight alongside them right now. But not now. His body was ready to jump out and fight at any moment. But the seal hadn't been lifted yet. However, tremble. His body moved. His body, which hadn't moved at all until just now, started to move little by little. It was strange. Rumble, rumble. The more strength he exerted, the more he could feel Oganyo Mountain trembling and moving. And that was when Sun Ogong realized. The seal has weakened. Sun Ogong's lips curled up. That brat Kim Yu-won. Creak. The body that had been crushed under the weight of the huge mountain slowly began to tremble. He came sooner than I thought. Rumble, rumble. Oganyo Mountain shook. The mountain's trembling was caused by a force that was powerful enough to move its weight. And within that mountain, a being with that much power was sleeping. That bastard was right. You don't need to lift the seal. Those were the confident words Sun Ogong had said when they were discussing ways to lift Sun Ogong's seal. Just weaken it a little. Then I can break it myself and come out. The spell that sealed Oganyo Mountain was powerful enough to seal the Great Sage, Heaven's Equal. In other words, it also meant that the Great Sage, Heaven's Equal's power was powerful enough to require such a strong seal. That bastard had already broken the seal on his own once. Sun Ogong hadn't just been locked up. He had been constantly preparing to break the seal, and he had actually broken out of the seal before. That's why there was no need to completely break the seal. If he could just weaken the spell that was binding Sun Ogong's body. After that, Sun Ogong would break the seal on his own. As expected, Wan Jiamjung, resonates. Flash. Yuan's eyes began to resonate. Great Sage, Heaven's Equal, is looking at you. That bastard had been released. Yuan's lips curled up. Without him realizing it, even Prince Natada's attention had been drawn away from Yuan. Rumble. In the sky, the thick white clouds let out an angry roar. Did you do this? Yuan didn't answer Prince Natada's question. From that silence, Prince Natada was certain that Sun Ogong's resurrection was Yuan's doing. You've done something big, something huge. Thud. Natra Prince passed by Wu Wan. Dozens of water orbs circled around him, and 2 swords that he had taken out were in his hands. Regardless, Wu Wan looked at the top of Oang Mountain. He's here. Thud, 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 thud. The peak of the shaking mountain. A man with long, snow-white hair stood up on top of it. Zhiqian De Seong. Sun Wukong looked up at the sky, stretching. Kya, wing, poof. Sun Wukong's stretch sent out a huge amount of mana in all directions. In an instant, a strong wind blew and a hole appeared in the clouds that had been blooming in the sky, centering on him. Sun Wukong jumped up, screaming. I'm back. A very excited voice. Wu Wan sighed and shook his head at that sight. That personality is the same now as it was in the past. Wu Wan turned his body and faced Top Qian Wang again. Then all that's left is. Now that Sun Wukong has been revived. He, who was going to give up this battlefield to Natra Prince, had a face that was much more hardened than before. Just having the Heavenly Realm's forces. I'm back, Wing. The voice that rang through their ears made the Yulong army feel their strength drain from their bodies. He had ears and eyes, so he could tell. The fact that Zhiqian De Seong had been revived. Really, he's revived. Yes, he has been revived. Yulong army realized that the fist that had been reaching out to him had stopped and looked at Uma Wang. His expression was really strange. Just a moment ago, he had been swinging his fists with his eyes bloodshot, but now he had tears in his eyes from longing and joy. Thanks to that, Yulong army was able to take some time to organize his complicated thoughts. Zheqian De Seong has been revived. Uma Wang and the clones. And Kim Yu-won. In addition to them, Sun Wukong's main body had been revived and joined. This fight was no longer a fight to prevent the Heavenly Realm War. It was no different from the Heavenly Realm War itself. And if so, it's impossible with this amount of force. The judgment was made quickly. There was no hesitation in his actions. All troops. Yulong army opened his throat wide and shouted, putting mana into his voice so that it could be heard beyond the mountain. All troops retreat. Retreat and prepare for the next Heavenly Realm War. Heavenly Realm War. The soldiers stirred for a moment at the weight of the name. However, as if he wouldn't tolerate even that moment, Yulong army shouted again. Hurry. Yes, sir. The soldiers and generals of the Heavenly Realm began to move busily. Retreat. It was not an action that the lofty name of the Heavenly Realm would take. The Heavenly Realm, one of the large guilds that ruled the tower, had pride and self-esteem as high as its position. However, the situation was so difficult that they had to throw away such pride. Of course. Where are you going in such a hurry? Thud. Wuma Wang stood in front of those soldiers of heaven. Once a fight has started, it must be finished. Please retreat. That is impossible. Wuma Wang's eyes narrowed. If we are to win the next fight. The next fight. At those words, Yilang Jingun felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the reaction he had expected. Their purpose was clearly to recapture the great sacred heaven. The next fight meant a full-scale heavenly war. This is not a spontaneous thought. They had been thinking about recapturing the great sacred heaven and beyond from the very beginning. Perhaps they had even considered the possibility that heavenly reinforcements, including himself, would be present. Neither the great sacred heaven nor the vast heaven is a great strategist. Yilang Jingun believed that one of the reasons why heaven had been able to win the last heavenly war was because of the two men's ignorance. Although the great sacred heaven and the vast heaven were both high-ranking high-rankers, they were originally individuals who did not possess any power. And in the case of such individuals, most of them were ignorant of strategy and tactics. But now, both the great sacred heavens recapture this time and his judgment after that felt different from the Wuma Wang that Yilang Jingun had known until now. Kim Yu-won, is it because of him? Clang. It was not easy to retreat like this. If Wuma Wang continued to pursue them as they tried to retreat, the damage would rapidly increase. Wuma Wang sent the other soldiers behind him and looked at Yilang Jingun, who was blocking his way. As that guy said, rescuing Sun Ogong is only the first objective. When the story about Sun Ogong's rescue was coming to an end, Yu-won sat up straight, as if the first story was now over. What do you mean? It's a story from over 1,000 years ago, one that you probably don't want to remember, but you and the great sacred heaven were defeated in the Heavenly War. The Heavenly War. Wuma Wang frowned at that story he didn't want to remember. What are you trying to say? That place will probably become a small-scale Heavenly War. Of course, the Heavenly Army, including Yilang Jingun, will be there. The important thing is that it's not heaven, but Ogong Mountain. What was he trying to say? Wuma Wang waited for Yu-won's words with one eyebrow raised. Once Sun Ogong is resurrected. Yu-won looked down at the drawing he had made on the floor and pointed to the mark of Sun Ogong he had drawn in the center of Ogong Mountain. If we do well, we'll be able to reduce heaven's forces by half there. Retreat. Crown Prince Natra muttered at Yilang Jingun's order, which he heard from far away. Like a great General Yilang Jingun and Crown Prince Natra had not been on good terms since long ago. Their goals of reviving heaven were the same, but their methods were too different. Unlike the fanatical nature of the envoy, the general always pursued safety and peace. It was the same this time. The difference in their personalities led them to make different choices. Listen up, everyone. Crown Prince Nata's voice rose to the sky. There is no retreat. We will capture the Cheonjeondae and Pyeongcheondae here. Kwao. A fearsome aura of magical power erupted from Crown Prince Nata. Do you understand? He was Crown Prince Nata, known as the Envoy of Heaven. The morale of the soldiers who knew his recorded history rose in an instant. Yes, sir, yes. However, that reckless fool. His father, Taktapchian Wang, clicked his tongue and shook his head, displeased with Crown Prince Nata's judgment. Scat. Crown Prince Nata raised his true sword up high. Crown Prince Nata's sword, which is said to cut the sky in half. The moment the sword fell down, Kwauk, along with the unsealed Ohangsands, the clouds blooming in the sky split in two. Thud. Crown Prince Nata, who had cut the mountain and the sky in half with a single sword strike, turned his head and looked at a place not so far away. Sun Wukong, who had cut his long white hair to his waist, was standing there. I'm grateful that you blew away this disgusting place. Thud, thud, Sun Wukong shook his head as if to remove the water from his ears. Otherwise, I would have blown it away myself. Thud. A small piece of stone fell onto Sun Wukong's palm. Crown Prince Nada, who discovered it, realized why the item they had been searching for so long had not been visible. Did you have the Ruyi Bang in your ear? Yeah, I usually carry it like this when I'm not using it. That's why. We couldn't find it. Even if you had found it, you wouldn't have been able to take it from me anyway. Unlike how it looks, this thing is really heavy. I know it's an item of the Dragon King who measured the depth of the sea. But even so, you're not the only one who can handle it. Maybe my big bro, but you. Don't make me laugh. Swoosh. The Ruyi Bang in Sun Wukong's hand grew longer. Crown Prince Nada, holding the true sword and the Gameo sword in both hands, shook off the tension that was wrapping around his body. What was in front of his eyes was not like the clones he had hunted for the past 1,000 years. The Ruyi Bang he was holding was not a fake held by a clone either. Sun Wukong and the Ruyi Bang. They were all real. Wyrick. The Ruyi Bang spun around in Sun Wukong's hand. And at that moment, get bigger, Chiok. Sun Wukong's mouth, which was aimed at Crown Prince Nada with the Ruyi Bang, opened. Ruyi. Chapter 234. Thud. The Ruyi Jingu Bang shot up to the sky. At the moment when the battle between the heavenly great sage and Tushin began. The soldiers, mouths hung open in shock as they saw the size of the Ruyi Jingu Bang. That's the Ruyi Jingu Bang. How big has it gotten? It's gone up into the clouds, I can't see it anymore. The Ruyi Jingu Bang rose above the clouds. Its size was incomparable to that of Sun Wukong's clones that had been sweeping across the battlefield. What happened to Tushin? What happened to him? Did he fly up on the Ruyi Jingu Bang? The soldiers were thrown into confusion at the sight of Tushin, who had disappeared as soon as the battle had begun. The Tushin they had believed in was gone. And it had happened with just one swing of the heavenly great sage's Ruyi Jingu Bang. It was unbelievable, but they couldn't help but believe it when they saw the Ruyi Jingu Bang in front of them. However, boom, screech, above the sky where the Ruyi Jingu Bang had stretched out, an ear-splitting roar was heard. The Ruyi Jingu Bang shook upwards. And below the clouds. Boom, a giant mace descended through the white clouds. A giant, earthen-colored hammer the size of a small mountain. One of the 6 weapons wielded by Prince Nezha. It was the monster-subduing pestle. That damn freak is still carrying around those weird weapons. Flick, it happened in the blink of an eye. The giant staff that had connected the sky and the earth was suddenly drawn into Sun Wukong's hand. Whoosh, Sun Wukong's body shot up into the air. Prince Nezha, holding the monster-subduing pestle in his hand, swung it with all his might at the flying Sun Wukong. At that moment, boom, screech, the roar of the monster-subduing pestle, which had struck the Ruyi Jingu Bang, was now coming from Sun Wukong's Ruyi Jingu Bang. Clang, clang, clang. The thin Ruyi Jingu Bang withstood the weight of the monster-subduing pestle. Prince Nezha frowned as he watched Sun Wukong, who was overpowering the weight of the monster-subduing pestle. Now that you're up, you're quite strong. Grow. Quote. A question mark appeared on Prince Nezha's face. He was trying to activate the Ruyi Jingu Bang's magic at such a close range, all of a sudden. What is he thinking? Prince Nezha's gaze turned to the tip of the Ruyi Jingu Bang, which had collided with the monster-subduing pestle. And in that moment, clang, clang, Prince Nezha saw the tip of the Ruyi Jingu Bang stuck in the surface of the monster-subduing pestle. Surely not, and it was soon that his hunch turned into certainty. Ruyi, boom, bang, the Ruyi Jingu Bang soared high into the sky. And around the Ruyi Jingu Bang, fragments of the Wanghyojeo rained down. The Wanghyojeo. The Ruyi Jingu Bang that was embedded in the Wanghyojeo grew larger and shattered the Wanghyojeo into pieces. Where are you looking? And in the meantime, his eyes were fixed on the fragments. Boom, bang, Sun Ogong's fist hit the back of Natha's head. Bam, quadadadadad, gung, Natha's body, which had flown down, was embedded in the Ogwansan mountain, which had been cut in half by the Chimioemjam. Ku rung, cuckoo goo goo. Due to the shock of Natha flying away, Ogwansan mountain collapsed one after another. Then, Sun Ogong, who had landed on the ground, pointed the Ruyi Jingu Bang in the direction of Ogwansan mountain. Chiok, grow, Ruyi, bang, Bam! A hole the size of the Ruyi Jingu Bang was made in the center of Ogwansan Mountain, where a landslide had occurred due to the impact of colliding with Nanatajang. Then Natha, who was being swept down along with the landslide, crashed into the Ruyi Jingu Bang and flew to the other side of Ogwansan Mountain. Kua! Natha, who was flying due to the impact, quickly protected his body with his arms. As if several ribs were broken, the pain in his chest was severe. Natha frowned as he felt the broken bone piercing his lungs and quickly stopped his feet in the air. Kulak, dead blood was spitting out of his mouth. Only then did Natha have no choice but to admit that his judgment was wrong. There's no chance of winning like this. He had lost his mind because it had happened so suddenly, but Sun Ogong, who could be seen beyond the hole in Ogwansan Mountain, looked too sharp to have just been released from the seal. The guy who had been sealed for over 1,000 years has become even stronger than before. Why on earth? Obviously, he thought now was the best time since he was released from the seal. Who? Pa Doc, Natha shouted, gritting his teeth. Retreat, retreat. This fight was their defeat. Now it was time to get out of here somehow and preserve the forces of heaven. If they lost all of the gods and generals of heaven here, the next heavenly war would be too disadvantageous for heaven. At the moment the retreat order was given. Where are you going? Flash. Suddenly, Sun Ogong, who flew in on his somersault cloud, appeared in front of the Crown Prince of Nada. Bam! Crash! Sun Ogong's fist struck the Crown Prince of Nada's arm. The Crown Prince of Nada blocked Sun Ogong's fist with one hand and pulled out a new weapon with the other. Clang. A long chain spread out around Sun Ogong. Screech. A transparent barrier spread around Sun Ogong, with the chain as its boundary. Is this the binding rope? Sun Ogong's brow furrowed. The binding rope. Of the 6 weapons that the Crown Prince of Nada possessed, it was the one that Sun Ogong found most troublesome. It was an item that completely cut off the inside and outside of the barrier, trapping its target. Sun Ogong had been imprisoned with this binding rope over 1,000 years ago. Boom! Sun Ogong pounded on the binding rope's barrier with his fist. Crack! A small crack appeared in the barrier. But that was all. The binding rope's barrier wasn't easily broken to that extent. General, the Crown Prince of Nada hurriedly looked for the commander of the heavenly soldiers. He had to get out of there and join the heavenly realm as soon as possible. Now, hurry, roar. When the Crown Prince of Nada turned his head, he saw a giant bull in front of him. It was the commander of the heavenly soldiers wielding the unmoon sword and fighting alongside Wu Ma Wang. So there was still one more left. The main character of the heavenly war that had turned the heavenly realm upside down along with the great sage, heaven's equal. As long as he remained, it would be difficult to escape this place safely. He hesitated for a moment. Should he help the commander of the heavenly soldiers and escape together? Or, preserve your strength? It was the commander of the heavenly soldiers' voice. The Crown Prince of Nada suddenly came to his senses at that voice. I'll stay here. He was holding his ground against Wu Ma Wang. He had given the order to retreat before the Crown Prince of Nada, so he had intended to stay behind from the beginning. Crackle. The binding rope's barrier was breaking more and more. No matter how strong the binding rope was, the being trapped inside was the great sage, heaven's equal. He wouldn't be able to stall for much longer. The decision wasn't difficult to make. Retreat. The Crown Prince of Nada abandoned the commander of the heavenly soldiers along with the binding rope. The commander and the general's orders rang out. The soldiers and generals, who had been hesitating due to the conflicting orders, hurriedly began to leave. Whoosh, crackle, the sky had opened up. One by one, the soldiers of heaven began to get sucked into it. Boom, quote exclamation mark quote. Trapped in the gourd, Sun Ogong broke the barrier and screamed from within. And in the meantime, Woom, the body of Takdap Qianwang, who had been fighting Wu Wan, also began to slowly rise towards heaven. We're a little short on time. Takdap Qianwang smacked his lips in regret and looked down at Wu Wan. The wounds from the spear cuts and stabs. Wu Wan covered the wounds on his body with one hand and looked up at Takdap Qianwang. It's unfortunate, really unfortunate. If I had just a few more minutes, your neck would be rolling around somewhere on the floor here. Blurry. Takdap Qianwang's face became blurry. The view through the Wan Jiamzheng shook. Of course, Wu Wan couldn't deny Takdap Qianwang's words. Was it because he had judged that he didn't have much time? Unlike before, Takdap Qianwang brandished his spear as if he was going to kill him. It seemed that he had decided that he had to somehow capture Wu Wan before the fight was over. As expected, you won't survive for long, Takdap Qianwang declared, pointing the tip of the spear in his hand at Wu Wan. I will definitely cut it off at the root before that sprout fully grows. Wu Hong, Takdap Qianwang's figure gradually blurred. It was a grim warning, but Wu Wan felt relieved instead. Anyway, this is over. The eyes that had been tinged with gold and red returned to their original color. The tension in his body eased. With this, the first goal of rescuing Sun Ogong had been achieved. No, the same went for the second goal. Kwa Oohk. Xing, the battle that was still ongoing without stopping. The allied forces of the west swung the Unweildo with all their might towards the Demon King. The clouds caught on the tip of the spear were torn to shreds, and hundreds and thousands of traces of the spear being swung were created on the ground. So that's how it happened. It was difficult to catch Crown Prince Nada, who had the gourd. The gourd was an item that was like a natural enemy to Sun Ogong, and with the gourd, his movements were bound to be tied up for at least a minute or so. In that case, there were two options they could choose during that time. Nada Prince and Aranjinguan could join forces to subdue Wuma Wang. Or while one person buys time, the other could take the soldiers and run away. And even for the two of them, it was impossible to subdue Wuma Wang in just a minute or so. Naturally, the latter became the choice, and Aranjinguan chose to be the one to stay. It was truly a choice befitting of Aranjinguan. And then, crack, buzz, buzz. Sun Wukong, who had been trapped in the gourd, was released. Clang, the barrier shattered, and Sun Wukong escaped outside. Sun Wukong looked around at the heavenly prince who had disappeared and the heavenly soldiers who were escaping one by one, and scratched his head in annoyance. They've already run away. Sun Wukong's gaze turned to Aranjinguan. He was holding his own quite well against Wuma Wang. Perhaps he hadn't even thought of running away from the beginning. Aranjinguan didn't seem to think of retreating even a little, even though he knew that Sun Wukong had escaped from the gourd. I'll leave that side to my Hung for now. Sun Wukong's gaze turned to Wu Wan, who was far away. Wu Wan, who was left alone as all the heavenly soldiers ran away. By now, all of Sun Wukong's clones had disappeared. Thud, thud, Sun Wukong walked towards Wu Wan. The distance was clearly quite far, but with each step Sun Wukong took, the distance shortened noticeably. Thud, after a while, Sun Wukong stopped in front of Wu Wan. It was strange. He had clearly thought that he would come to fight Aranjinguan without even looking back once he was released from the gourd. An unfamiliar yet familiar feeling. One thing was for sure, the way Sun Wukong was reacting right now was very different from what Wu Wan had expected. This isn't the Sun Wukong I know. Sun Wukong came to him, not to Wuma Wang, whom he had been waiting for so long to fight, nor to Aranjinguan, his old enemy. Why on earth? What he didn't understand even more was, why is he looking at me like that? Why on earth was Sun Wukong, who must have just seen him for the first time, looking at him with such playful eyes? And then, swish, long time no see, Sun Wukong, who had been imprisoned in Owangshan for over 1,000 years, reached out his hand towards Wu Wan and greeted him. Kim Wu Wan, quote exclamation mark quote, chapter 235. Wu Wan's eyes wavered. Long time no see, it was an impossible greeting. The Sun Ogong in front of him definitely wouldn't know him. Why do you look like that? It's not like you. You, what are you? As you can see, Sun Ogong shrugged with both hands on his waist. Zhiqian De Seong, Tuchian Sungbul, immortal, Sun Ogong. It was a playful tone, but Wu Wan couldn't just let this situation go. It's not like you. That made it clear. The Sun Ogong in front of him knew him. No, it wasn't just that he knew him. Wu Wan stared at his face intently and eventually had no choice but to accept it. How did you come back? Well, it's a bit of a long story. Sun Ogong looked back at the Demon King Wuma Wang and the Eryongjin troops who were fighting on one side and said, should we clean up over there and finish talking? The Eryongjin general opened his eyes to the weight pressing down on his body. For a brief moment, he felt like his mind had wandered far away and then came back. He tried to raise his body by putting strength in his arms, but he couldn't do as he pleased. It was because of the strength of a giant sitting on him, pressing him down. Just lie still. The Demon King Wuma Wang. He was sitting on his back. His legs were tied up tightly. From the looks of it, it seemed like he had used the discarded hemp rope that the Crown Prince Nada had left behind. The Awol sword, his weapon, was in the Demon King Wuma Wang's hand. In this state, he couldn't move either of his arms, nor could he untie the hemp rope and escape on his own. It's over. At the last moment, it was because Zhiqian De Seong had joined the fight. He had tried to hold out for a few more moves, but there was nothing he could do. Come to think of it, Zhiqian De Seong. He looked around and saw Sun Ogong standing far away. And across from him was Wuan. You're disappointed, aren't you? Chi. The Demon King Wuma Wang lit a cigarette that he had found in his arms while sitting on the Eryongjin general. He's not the Hung I've been waiting for over 1,000 years, and he's someone else first. The Eryongjin general's eyes widened at the unbelievable words. Zheqian De Seong over someone other than Pyongqian De Seong. Zheqian De Seong's love for his Hung was famous in the heavens. It was Zheqian De Sungwo, saying to the would save one brother, Had charged alone into the heavenly realm to engage in reckless battle. Actually, as Orange Jingen who had intervened in that battle and blocked Zheqian Dezong, it was unbelievable. The gaze of Wuma Wang, who had exhaled a long cigarette, turned to Yuan. But I also can't help but be curious. Wuma Wang, savoring the taste of the cigarette he was enjoying for the first time in a long time, opened his mouth. How does that guy know the youngest? And how does the youngest know that guy? Why did he go to such lengths to save the youngest? His speech trailed off. Naturally, the gaze of Oranjingen also turned to Yuan and Sun Ogong. At the very least, the parties involved should know, right? Now you won't hear it. Hung Nim must be upset, but, well, it can't be helped. Sun Ogong, who had raised his magical power to block out the surrounding sounds, sat down on one of the many piles of stones scattered around. Yuan, who soon noticed that Wuma Wang was in Sun Ogong's line of sight, asked. Are you okay? What, you wanted to see him so much? Calling him, Hung Nim, Hung Nim. Sun Ogong did not answer. Yuan looked alternately at Sun Ogong, who was silent for a moment, and Wuma Wang, who was sitting on Oranjingen far away. If the Sun Ogong in front of him was the guy he knew, he would have missed Wuma Wang not for just 1,000 years, but for several times that amount. I just set my priorities. Sun Ogong's eyes curved into a crescent moon shape as if amused. First you, then Hung Nim. Is that an important order? Of course. Sun Ogong shrugged and replied. If you don't solve the urgent things first, you'll all die anyway. He really is. The Sun Ogong in front of him was the Sun Ogong he knew. Not the Sun Ogong of this world line who had returned to the past using the clockwork. It was the Sun Ogong who had lived in the same era and the same world as him. So, did you know it was salty? What happened? Clearly, only one person could return using the clockwork. That was why they had deliberated over who to send back. Many rankers, including Odin, Kronos, Asura, and Vishnu, had gathered to decide on the candidate, and the candidates had been narrowed down to 3. And the one who came back from it was none other than himself. However, that's what happened. Sun Wukong scratched his head and answered with an awkward expression. And at that answer, Yuan's expression hardened. Who else made a sacrifice? Sun Wukong hesitated for a moment. It seemed like it was difficult to answer. Tell me, who was it? Mimir. He didn't completely sacrifice himself. Since he had previous achievements, they said he only lost his eye. His eye, it was Mimir's choice. No one forced him. He said to relax, but it wasn't very reassuring. To Mimir, his eyes were everything. After losing his eyes, he would become significantly weaker and lose most of his powers. Moreover, Odin was still next to him. Odin he allowed it. Odin, Mimir's only friend, and the one who cared for Mimir more than anyone else. If he had known about this, he wouldn't have just sat there. Perhaps a civil war would have broken out before the fight against the outer gods ended. However, he allowed it. An unbelievable answer came out of Sun Wukong's mouth. How? Mimir persuaded him. That's not a convincing enough story, is it? If it were just Mimir, then yes. Did someone else help persuade him? Who? How? It was you. Me. Yeah. Sun Wukong scratched his head with one hand as if it was itchy, an action he hadn't done in a long time, and answered. You went back alone, didn't you? Everyone seemed to have been worried about that. Odin too. How does that make me help persuade him? If the person Mimir was trying to help wasn't you, then Odin wouldn't have allowed it, right? That's why everyone thinks that. Odin, me, it was hard to believe. That Odin would allow Mimir to sacrifice his eye to help him. Yuan kept his mouth shut for a moment and then spoke about what he had been curious about. What about over there? It was something he had always wondered about. He wondered what happened to the original world, not the past he was currently living in. His comrades who fought alongside him. Were they still alive? But he had thought it was a question that would never be answered, but now he could hear about it. It's still a mess. A few more people died. Oh, the kids asked me to tell you, but I'm not going to say who died or who lived. There's no point in talking about it, and it'll just make me feel worse. Sun Ogong covered his ears with both hands before she could even ask the question. However, Wu Wan had no intention of asking such a question in the first place. Who died and who lived? There was something more important than that. Are they still alive? Anyone at all who was still alive? Who? Sun Ogong opened his ears and asked. Anyone. Ah, he chuckled and removed his hands from his ears before answering. Many are still alive, more than you think. You can tell just by the fact that I'm here, right? Sun Ogong had come to the past. Mimir had sacrificed his eye to send Sun Ogong here. To help Wu Wan. We kept fighting after that. A lot. Sun Ogong's eyes, as he spoke, pierced through Wu Wan's soul. We kept fighting too, just like you. Wu Wan's heart pounded in his chest. After returning to the past using the clock spring, he had always thought that he had returned alone and was fighting alone. He thought that he was the only one who knew about Outer, and that he had to bear this heavy burden alone. But it seemed that wasn't the case. In reality, everyone was bearing this heavy burden together. Weren't you lonely? You were surrounded by people you know, but none of them knew you. Sun Ogong supported his head with both hands and turned to look at Uma Wang. Come to think of it, it must have been pretty lonely to be the only one who remembered. Uma Wang did not remember Sun Ogong. No, to be exact, he was not from the same world as Sun Ogong. That was why the Sun Ogong that he remembered was only from the distant past. Sun Ogong only realized this after he was released from Ohang Mountain. It can't be helped. It was everyone's decision for me to come back, but it was also my choice. So it's something I have to accept. Wu Wan met Sun Ogong's eyes and chuckled. He had said that, but it still felt new to see him again like this. I'm still glad you came. It felt like Sun Wukong was the only one with color in a black and white world. It was as if he had found the first person on an uninhabited island. They're all fighting. The two of them were not alone. No, it felt like there were many of them again. His heavy shoulders felt a little lighter. Just knowing that someone was fighting somewhere with him made such a difference. Only then was Yu Wan able to sit comfortably like Sun Wukong. What is everyone up to? Odin must still be the same. What about the Dragon King, Gandharva, and Hercules? It was a long-awaited greeting. It wasn't the right time to talk about the first battle with the heavenly world. But there was so much he wanted to hear. He felt like his heart would be lighter if he could just hear a little bit of the story. A lot has changed. Gandharva has become quieter since Asura died. After the battle to capture the foolish chaos ended. There had been many changes, as many had lost their lives in the large-scale battle. In addition, the movement of the outer gods had become more cautious than before. It seemed that the death of the foolish chaos had a great impact. Sun Wukong continued to tell him about his colleagues' recent activities. Then, all of a sudden, Hercules seems to have opened his heart to Zeus. As they fought together through a life-threatening crisis, they slowly began to accept each other's sincerity. Hercules to Zeus what? Yu Wan was able to hear a dubious story even though he heard it with his own ears. Are you kidding me? Why, is it that unbelievable that Hercules would open his heart to Zeus? No, that's... Sun Wukong blinked his eyes and looked at Yu Wan as if to ask what the problem was. Despite watching him for a long time, Sun Wukong was clumsy when it came to lying. And of course, there was no way he could act like this. In that case, in this guy's time, Zeus is alive. And he was on their side, fighting with the outer gods. And that was a completely different future from the one Yu Wan remembered. In the place where I was, he definitely died by Hercules' hand. Chapter 236. It was strange. Zeus and Hercules, who should have been dead, were reconciled. In the future I knew, Zeus was dead. What are you talking about? Son Goku made a puzzled expression. Looking at that expression, it was certain. In the world he came from, Zeus was alive. Zeus, who should have died at the hands of Hercules, is now imprisoned in Asgard's prison. I saved him by changing the future. Yu Wan's head was spinning. Even so, Son Goku scratched his head and looked confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Just in case, tell me about other situations. As detailed as possible. What other situations? Anything about Olympus or the Three-Eyed Tribe? Yu Wan asked about the major events he had caused. Son Goku, searching his memory, hesitated for a moment before starting to tell stories he knew, one by one. The flow of events had not changed in the grand scheme of things. The only major difference was the relationship between Hercules and Zeus. I can think of two possibilities. Yu Wan, having organized his thoughts, opened his mouth. First, the future you lived in changed immediately due to the influence of the present I changed. Oh, is that plausible? Second, the world you live in and the world I live in now are completely separate worlds. Separate worlds? The theory of parallels I don't know. I heard about it a long time ago. Yu-won shook his head at the complicated thought. If he felt this way, how much more so for Son Goku? However, one thing was for sure, the possibility of changing the future had arisen. If I change this place, the other side might change as well. Possibility. That alone was enough. It meant that his actions, which had previously felt vague, were actually bearing fruit. If he did well here and now, perhaps he could even change the future he had been in. We'll find out more details later. The joy of reunion was over. Gulp. Son Goku smacked his lips at the sound of his watch ringing. I haven't eaten in a while. Bubble. The soup boiled with meat inside. Son Goku, who had caught a mountain beast by releasing his doppelganger, immediately grabbed the deer's hind leg and began to chew on it. Chew. Son Goku began to eat ravenously. The Ox King began to eat with him in silence. Then, the two of you have a lot of secrets. PFF'd. Son Goku spat out the food he had been chewing into the Ox King's mouth. The Ox King, whose face was instantly covered in saliva and chewed meat, wiped his face with the back of his hand without expression. Then, Son Goku opened his mouth in a panic. WH, what secret? He seemed to be trying to be as calm as possible, but his panic was evident. Of course, Yu-won and Son Goku had been talking, blocking even their voices with magic power. It was clear that there was some kind of secret, and it was inevitable that he would be suspicious. However, so he knows, Yu-won discovered the thorn in the Ox King's words. He didn't just say, you have a secret. He spoke as if he knew what the secret was. Did you hear everything? I know it's rude to eavesdrop. I'm sorry. The Ox King, who wiped away the saliva and meat pieces that Son Goku had spat out with his sleeve, nodded. I thought it was strange no matter how I thought about it. No, I should say I was suspicious. Are you talking about me? Yes, the Ox King nodded. The system is fair, so is time, and there is a limit to talent. It was the same doubt everyone had when they looked at Yu-won. Yu-won was capable enough to face him. It was a level of growth that couldn't be explained simply by saying that he was talented. After all, Yu-won had only just reached the 50th floor. But it's like you have no limits. And to think that someone who hasn't been in the tower for long would risk their life to save their youngest brother. Doubt, and a situation that was more than enough to arouse curiosity. That's why I decided to eavesdrop. The barrier that this idiot of a brother put up is nothing to me. Uma Wang's gaze soon turned to Sun Ogong. Sun Ogong avoided his gaze as if he had committed a sin. No, to be exact, he was trying to avoid one question. Where was I not there? But in the end, Uma Wang asked the question. It was a difficult question to answer. But he couldn't avoid it. You weren't there. Sun Ogong's eyes glistened as he thumped his stuffy chest. But now, I'll make sure you are. Really? Uma Wang raised his head, the corners of his mouth slightly raised. The night sky was unusually dark. Unlike himself, who only thought about the present, Sun Ogong in front of him was thinking much further ahead. I've waited over 1,000 years for you, but I guess that wasn't it. Even though they had just met again, the fact that he might not be around in the distant future made Uma Wang's heart ache. Perhaps Sun Ogong also couldn't be that happy at this moment because he knew that fact. Let's win, in the fight against those outer bastards. And in the fight against the heavenly realm. For now, it was a priority to deal with the immediate task at hand. The fight against the heavenly realm was only just beginning. And, Uma Wang scooped up a spoonful of the boiling soup with a ladle. Even though the time we have to live is different, it's good to see you again. My youngest brother from the future. Slurp, eat up. Late at night, after dinner. Uma Wang had fallen asleep. Surprisingly, he was quite a heavy sleeper. They had talked about many things during dinner, but they were stories that had been pushed aside for over 1,000 years. No matter how much they talked, it wasn't enough. They would have to continue filling in the gaps in their stories. Moreover, is it good to see me after so long? Yu-won walked through the cold night air. Sun Ogong, who was sitting outside the house, had a complex expression that didn't match his words. It's good. Do as you please. Don't make such an awkward face. Me, am I? You've never been good at hiding your expressions. Sun Ogong's simplicity was the best among those Yu-won had known. He always showed his emotions on his face. And it was the same now. Why was this guy, who was always so cheerful, making such an expression? Is it because of my brother? Or is it because of me? My brother. What's there to be awkward about with you? Why, it's not like a dead person came back to life, and it's not like someone you didn't want to see suddenly appeared, so I wonder if this is really the person I knew. A person from another world. Sun Ogong couldn't get a grip on that awkward feeling. But it's also good to see you again. Sun Ogong scratched his head with an awkwardly embarrassed face. He couldn't get a grip on the conflicting emotions of happiness and awkwardness. The family he had longed to see had come back to life. He was happy, but Uma Wong in this world hadn't died yet. It was because Yuan had rescued him and he hadn't been executed in the Heavenly Realms prison. Anyway, it's all a bit complicated. Now that I'm here, I wonder if this is really the world I know. The world Yuan and Sun Ogong lived in had already been devastated by the outer to the point where its original colors could not be found. As such, Sun Ogong felt that the forest and sky he was seeing now were too different from what he knew. Still, it's definitely good. Sun Ogong took a deep breath of the cold night air. The smell is good too. Things that you can enjoy freely without paying a dime become luxuries that you can't enjoy even if you pay for them in the future. Sun Ogong, who had just returned to this world, was slowly accepting that fact. Yuan left Sun Ogong alone for a moment so as not to break his reverie. A brief silence. Yuan spoke to Sun Ogong, who had the moonlight reflected in his eyes through the clouds. Do you remember what you're going to do from now on? Sun Ogong was one of the people who had planned with him. He had even been mentioned as a strong candidate to use the clockwork with Yuan. Do you remember all of that? He had forgotten. Sun Ogong wasn't very smart. He seemed to remember what he had to do within the big picture and what had happened in the past, but he couldn't remember the details. Furthermore, I was trapped inside Ogui Mountain for several years. The reason why Yuan was a stronger candidate than Sun Ogong among those who would return to the past. One of the reasons was that Sun Ogong was trapped in Ogui Mountain. If he were to return to the past using the clockwork, if he were to return to the point in time when Sun Ogong was trapped in Ogui Mountain, everything would be for naught. How much time has passed, but you remember all of that? Right. Yeah, what do you expect? And before you came here, Odin said this. Yuan, who had been sighing, had his eyes sparkle at the name Odin. Odin, if I'm trapped in Ogui Mountain and you come to save me as planned, you would have already accomplished a lot of things according to plan, so he told me not to ruin the flow. It wasn't wrong. Sun Ogong's strength was definitely great. He hadn't recklessly barged into the heavenly realm and caused a commotion for nothing. Regarding the battle between Sun Ogong and the heavenly realm, the ranking management bureau had said this. The battle between the heavenly realm, a giant guild, and Sun Ogong, a single person. They said that in that battle, the heavenly realm would win 99 times out of 100, but there was a 1 in 100 chance that Sun Ogong would win. Sun Ogong's problem was that he believed in that 1 in 100 chance and charged forward recklessly, but Sun Ogong's strength was that overwhelming. However, so from now on, you'll do the things that are a pain in the ass. If I make a mistake and something goes wrong, then there's no going back. Sun Ogong grinned and grabbed the Ruyi Jingu Bang next to him. I'll just focus on beating and breaking things like I always do. He had just been released from the Ogui Mountain he had been tied up in. His fight with Crown Prince Natha had been short, and his body was still tingling. Beating and breaking things, that was the thing that Sun Ogong could do best out of all the things he could do. And in other words, Sun Ogong had been mentioned as a candidate to return here because of that one talent. Immortality, that fraudulent ability alone was enough to explain Sun Ogong's existence. It's perfect, if only these two could return. Having thought about it so many times, Yuan couldn't help but be happy about the current situation. 20%. The plans that had seemed impossible were now at a stage where they were actually possible. Yuan got up from his seat with a slight smile. Is your body okay? Do you not know my body? Yeah, Yuan nodded. As expected, he had asked for nothing. Then, I have something for you to do tomorrow. Something to do? What? The heavenly realm. At those words, Sun Ogong's eyes sparkled. I'm going to go smash it up tomorrow. Chapter 237. Late at dawn, the heavenly realm, which had only just recovered from the chaos of the last battle, was hurriedly gathering its rankers. Of the soldiers we took, 30% died. The rankers are the same. No, the rankers suffered more damage. If you include the injured, it's over half. It wasn't easy to even grasp the extent of the damage. There was too little time for that. Jackie and Dizong could invade here tomorrow. We lost our Grand General in this battle. This is a great loss that will go down in the history of the heavenly realm. But Tushan and Taktap Qianwang are still. You mean Tushan, who lost to Jekian Dizong in this battle? The conference room was bustling. The many people gathered there raised their voices. There was no Grand General or Tushan present. With no one to lead the meeting, anyone who wanted to spoke. Tushan was hurriedly receiving treatment to recover from today's battle. The meeting, in which they argued over who was at fault and what the crisis was no longer a meeting. It was then, again, the sound of hard straw sandals heading to the conference room echoed. In the first place, stop talking now. The rough generals who had been fighting with raised voices lowered their voices. The room became quiet, everyone held their breath and rose from their seats. Again, an old man wearing straw sandals entered, escorted by Taktap Qianwang. The old man, dressed in a blue dragon robe and supporting himself with a cane, walked towards his seat with not so quick steps. Everyone seems to be in good spirits. The old man laughed cheerfully. However, no one took his laughter as a good thing. The current situation in the heavenly realm was so serious that it could not be found in past history. But why? Continue. I should listen to some of those stories. It sounds interesting. At the old man's sharp words, the generals who had risen from their seats bowed their heads. I have committed a mortal sin. I have committed a mortal sin. The eyes of the old man who had been laughing narrowed. Really, the old man, who had been pondering something while stroking his chin, reached out his hand. Then you should die. Goo, cheek. The round table in the conference room cracked, and the building shook as if it would collapse at any moment. Then, please be patient, the general behind the old man, Taktap Qianwang, spoke up. If we kill all of them now, the next fight will be difficult. Why don't we just leave them until then? Until then, the old man lowered his outstretched hand and stroked his long beard with it. A long thought. The old man, Jade Emperor, opened his mouth after a long time. Prove your worth. As if he had nothing more to say, the Jade Emperor stood up from his seat. Those who are incompetent and fail to prove themselves will die by my hand. A thunderous response erupted at his words. As if he had finished all he had to do, the Jade Emperor left his seat. The Jade Emperor asked Taktap Qianwang, who was assisting him, in a calm voice. What did Jekian Dizong look like up close? He was greater than I had heard. Was it your first meeting? He wasn't around when you were active. Although he was the Jade Emperor, the highest being in the heavenly realm, he respected Taktap Qianwang. It was a courtesy to Taktap Qianwang, who had created the heavenly realm, a lofty guild, together with him. He is the archenemy of our heavenly realm. Again. Walking down the long corridor, the Jade Emperor spoke to Taktap Qianwang behind him. I will not ask you to deal with him. That is the role of the young men of this era. Is it possible with just the young men? It will be difficult, there is no Grand General. Then, but can't they at least act as bait? Bait. In the first place, the Jade Emperor had no expectation that the generals who had gathered just now would be able to catch Jekian Dizong. Although there is no general in human tactics, the power of the top high rankers had the power to overwhelm the vast majority. However, they do not know that fact. Even if it's the Heavenly Citadel, I had a vague expectation that it would be possible somehow if the rankers of the Heavenly Realm joined forces. Of course, the rankers who had fought directly against the Heavenly Citadel in the past would have thought otherwise. The Heavenly Realm will suffer great losses in the next battle. It might even collapse. Shouldn't we prepare for it? Prepare we should. We must. Again, the Jade Emperor, who had stopped walking, looked up at the ceiling. For the sake of the Heavenly Realm. No, to be exact, beyond that. He must have been looking up at the high heavens of the Heavenly Realm. Yes, for the sake of the Heavenly Realm. For that, they must die. Quote. The Jade Emperor's eyes wavered. Even though he hadn't turned around, his expression was all too clear in the Jade Emperor's eyes. People can be gathered again, and collapsed cities can be rebuilt. Again, the Jade Emperor began to walk again. I am the center of this heavenly realm. I am the heavenly realm. It was an extremely self-centered thought. However, the great sage, heaven's equal, couldn't deny it. Who could deny it? As the Jade Emperor said, he was the living heavenly realm itself. In other words, that means you're that wary of the Heavenly Citadel. The great sage, heaven's equal, followed the Jade Emperor and looked out the window. It seemed like it would be a short but very long battle. In the midst of it, the great sage, heaven's equal, recalled what he had to do. Kim Yu-won. The Jade Emperor seemed to be focused on the name Heavenly Citadel, but from the beginning, he had only been concerned about one person. He didn't know why. It could be because he was the culprit who released the Heavenly River Citadel and the Heavenly Citadel, or it could be the old man's obsession. However, it wasn't just for those reasons. He's too big of a threat. Even if the heavenly realm were to win again in this battle. If Kim Yu-won were to live, the conviction that the heavenly realm would eventually be destroyed in the distant future. That conviction created an obsession to catch Kim Yu-won. I'll cut him down with my own hands in this battle. 3 people wearing their hats pulled down low over their faces. Of the 3 people standing in front of the checkpoint entering the heavenly realm, Sun Wukong, who had the most impatient personality, opened his mouth. Shall we start? His shoulders were already shaking in anticipation of the upcoming battle. It was a bad habit. They must have prepared a lot on their end too. Don't let your guard down. You've always nagged too much. Wu Ma Wang nodded at Sun Wukong's pouting lips. That's right. Listen closely. You're the same, Hung. Yeah, thud. Wu Ma Wang walked forward. You and I, we're both impatient. Wu Ma Wang walked towards the checkpoint. Yu-won watched Wu Ma Wang's back as he began to walk, ignoring the long line. That Hung is just like that. Sun Wukong shrugged and said. He absolutely hates stuffy places. The difference between him and me is that he can endure it well when he needs to. His eyes curved as if he found it funny. He's merciless when it comes to things that aren't necessary. Thud. Wu Ma Wang reached the checkpoint and stopped for a moment. A high, thick wall. Inside was the heavenly realm, and at its center were the Jade Emperor and countless rankers of the heavenly realm. It was like a giant fortress. Who are you? The heavenly realm soldiers, who were already tense in the ominous atmosphere, stepped forward to guard against Wu Ma Wang, who had walked forward, ignoring the line. Wu Ma Wang, who had been looking up at the sky-high wall for a moment, looked around at the soldiers who had begun to surround him. I am not one who holds great loyalty to the heavenly realm, so I hope to leave this place right away. Creak. Wu Ma Wang's fist clenched. I plan to collapse your heavens starting now. Goo. Crash. Rumble. The ground Wu Ma Wang was standing on caved in. The soldiers panicked at the rapidly increasing flow of magic power. Hey, by any chance. Damn it, he's here. The soldiers didn't make the foolish move of attacking Wu Ma Wang, relying on their numbers. Apparently, the news of the attack on Heaven's Court and the heavenly plane had already reached even the lowest-ranking soldiers of heaven. The soldiers began to retreat from the Monkey King one by one to save their own lives. And that moment, boom, the Monkey King's fist stretched out towards the high wall. Kwang, ku jik. The tall, solid wall bent. It was a wall that had protected the territory of heaven for a long time. Of course, it didn't collapse that easily. However, Kwang, the Monkey King's fist, which stretched out towards the wall, did not stop at once. Kwang, zir. Cracks began to appear in the wall. In an instant, the cracks spread throughout the entire long wall. And that moment, grow bigger. From behind, the Monkey King's As You Wish cudgel was aimed at the wall. As You Wish. Thud. The huge cudgel struck the wall, which was shaking precariously. The As You Wish cudgel, which hit the wall almost simultaneously with the Monkey King's fist, finally succeeded in collapsing the wall that surrounded heaven. Kururur. The long wall began to collapse like a domino, falling apart. I could have finished it. I couldn't help it. One of the Monkey King's eyebrows twitched as if he didn't like the Monkey King's answer, who was now holding the As You Wish cudgel, which had shrunk again. You'll get scolded later. Despite the Monkey King's threat, the Monkey King just grinned. Right now, the only thing on his mind was the thought of fighting excitedly for the first time in a long time. But then, keep in mind, a voice that poured cold water on the Monkey King's burning head was heard. What we have to do first? Ah, yes. The Monkey King pouted with a flushed face. Fighting you is fun, but fighting with you is not fun. Kururur. The dust that had risen from the collapsed wall gradually cleared. The Monkey King's and golden cudgel, which was holding the As You Wish cudgel, looked beyond it. The odds of winning go up that much, though. The soldiers of heaven were seething. Perhaps because they knew that they would come in advance, they seemed to be quite prepared. And among them, surrender the heavenly court now. Uttering truly absurd words, the General of Heaven, who seemed to be their representative, stepped forward. If you surrender now, the Jade Emperor has said that he will forgive most of your sins. If you ignore this mercy. Ah, shut up. The Monkey King covered his ears with his buzzing voice. Even though he must have seen that indifferent reaction, the general continued to speak. You have no way to win against heaven, so I recommend that you surrender immediately. What did you say? The Monkey King's indifferent gaze changed. The Monkey King turned his head and looked at Wu Won. You know, too. What? Who won when I fought heaven? Of course I do. How many times have you bragged about it? That's right. I won. Wyrick. Even then, I was alone. The Monkey King twirled the as-you-wish cudgel and walked towards the main camp of heaven. Besides, there are 3 of us now. Waruk. The appearance of the soldiers of heaven was captured in the Wa and golden cudgel. Kuk, Huk, Hoop. As the heavenly court gradually approached, the soldiers blocking it fell one by one. It was no use wielding the as-you-wish cudgel. No player in their right mind would dare stand before the heavenly court. I don't need the weaklings. Jebek, the Monkey King, who slowly walked to the center of the soldiers, looked at the general who was foaming at the mouth. Come out, you son of a Jade Emperor. Chapter 238. The Jade Emperor. He was not a being who could be explained simply as the leader of the heavenly realm. Along with Odin of Asgard, he was one of the oldest and most ancient high rankers in this tower. The beginning of the heavenly realm and the one who was respected by all the rankers of the heavenly realm. The heavenly realm itself. He had become a being that was more like a god than a ranker in the heavenly realm. It's funny, but whenever the Jade Emperor was mentioned, Son Goku would snort and always repeat the same thing. A guy who hasn't even become a real god is acting like a god. Son Goku broke the Jade Emperor's neck and washed his body with his blood. The reason why Son Goku's ranking had skyrocketed at that time was because he had turned the heavenly realm upside down and defeated the Jade Emperor. Son Goku's ranking is now 12th. Wu Jin looked at Son Goku's back as he shouted, "Come out, you son of a Jade Emperor." Will he jump up again like that when this fight is over? Son Goku himself didn't seem to be very interested in his ranking, but the meaning of ranking was different for rankers. For them, ranking was a measure of strength, a quantified power, and soon honor. In addition, the ranking was like the recognition of the ranker. Well, since he's moving with the Great Demon King this time, his ranking won't rise as sharply as it did then. He'll probably have to share the ranking points with the Great Demon King. Raising Son Goku's ranking was a minor reward that followed his future plans. And there were many more events left where he could raise his ranking in the future. The Heavenly Realm War is just the first step. There will be many more fights like this in the future. Moreover, if there was a big event that surpassed the Heavenly Realm War, the real body is Ragnarok. That's why there was no need to be too attached to the ranking right now. No, rather, if he could raise his ranking, which had stopped or even fallen for a long time, with the existence of the Great Demon King, he might be able to go in a better direction in the long run. Thud, Son Goku walked between the soldiers blocking his way. Although he had come here to fight, he did not enjoy fighting against the foot soldiers before him. Son of the Jade Emperor. Jing, Sun Ogong's cry rang throughout the heavens. A voice that grated on the ears. Don't hide like a rat, come out here right now. Perhaps they heard his voice. A response came immediately. You called, and here I am. Wuma Wong looked at the black horde that began to gather before his eyes. There were far more than the number of troops he had seen the previous day. Among them, Wuma Wong looked at the generals leading the charge. Looks like Tushin has already recovered his body. Thud, Sun Ogong looked away as if he was not interested. Will Hung Nim take care of him? You mean Tushin? Yes, you are a strange one. I must find someone else. Wuma Wang's eyes narrowed as he realized Sun Ogong's intentions from his answer. That guy is my prey as well. I know, Sun Ogong nodded. In any case, I've already seen the end once, so I'm not too attached. Contrary to his words, Sun Ogong's eyes burned brightly. Wuma Wang, who had been observing his reaction, looked around. Looks like that guy has already started moving. He left earlier. I know, Yu Wan, who had disappeared from his seat. Sun Ogong smiled at Wuma Wang's worried expression. Don't worry too much. I know that guy well, he's not the type to die in a place like this. I know he's strong, but... No, the corners of Sun Ogong's lips rose as if they would touch his ears. Hung Nim doesn't know, quote. If it was just a matter of strength, I would have probably returned first. I would have had a better chance of winning if I fought him. Everyone acknowledged Sun Ogong's strength. Even Odin, the oldest veteran and the highest-ranking member of Sun Ogong and Yu Wan's team, acknowledged it. But even so, Yu Wan was the one who was chosen in the end. And it was almost unanimous. You don't need to worry about that guy. Sun Ogong smiled as he walked towards the horde that was rushing in. He's a guy who I acknowledged, someone who is better than me. Waruk, eyes that burned brightly, Kururuer, rumble. Drawing his sword, Yu Wan looked up the stairs. Stretch, Ruyi. Whiz. The Ruyi Jingu Bang held in Sun Ogong's hand extended as if it could reach the sky. Then, high ranker wearing a cloud around his body and a long stick that stretched for several li. Let's begin again. The invasion of the heavenly great emperor began. Crash! Lightning struck from the dry sky. It was a different nature of magic than Yuan's lightning. Yuan turned his head and found the Ruyi Jingu bang far away. It started. The fight between Sun Ogong and the Bull Demon King. Those two were great, but the heavenly realm's forces were no pushovers either. It was a matter of time before they won, but how long that time would take was the key to this battle. The Jade Emperor isn't showing his face. The high ranker representing the heavenly realm. But despite that, the Jade Emperor had long since stepped away from the front lines. In fact, there were only a handful of rankers who had seen him fight. But even so, the Jade Emperor's rank had risen higher than before. Ranks don't just go up for nothing. As the heavenly realm grew stronger, the rank of the Jade Emperor, their leader, would also rise, but even considering that, the speed at which his rank was rising was exponential. The administrator and the rank management bureau know. Thud, how much the Jade Emperor has changed from before. The center of the heavenly realm. Climbing the tall staircase that led to the sky, Yuan raised his head. The heavenly realm, which should have been empty to stop Sun Ogong and the Bull Demon King. But above it, a man sat waiting for Yuan. I don't know how His Majesty knows all this. Swish, the great sage, heaven's equal. He rose from his seat and greeted Yuan. I can't fathom the end of that wisdom. Don't you agree? Holding the large spear placed next to him, the great sage, heaven's equal, raised his fighting spirit. He seemed to be trying to somehow negotiate with Yuan in this place. Yuan also hadn't thought he would be able to climb up here so easily, no matter how much he had dispersed his forces. Of course, he hadn't expected that they would send the great sage, heaven's equal, as a mere gatekeeper. If you were really that wise, you would have come yourself instead of sending you. Clang, drawing hisward, Yuan looked up the stairs. Because of that foolishness, we will win this fight. What? Thinking that the person he served had been insulted, the heavenly demon king's face hardened more than ever before. But it was only for a moment. As if it were his own rule that anger was a powerful poison in a fight, he quickly calmed down the anger that had begun to boil. And instead, there's something he believes in. He looked at Yuan with different eyes than before. It was definitely the same face he had seen the day before. But now, the way he looked at him was different. No. To be exact, it should be said that his own perspective of Yuan had changed. Just yesterday, he felt like an unripe beast. Yuan was a beast. A great beast with the qualities to become the king of a forest. However, the beast was still a young child who hadn't fully grown, and it seemed that his spear could easily pierce its neck. But why now? The beast in front of him seemed to have grown up in just one short day, and it seemed to be baring its teeth at him fiercely. Are you wondering what is different? Yuan's question made the heavenly demon king's eyebrows twitch. There was no answer, but even with that alone, Yuan could feel that he was wary of him. What is different is my mindset. Yesterday, I didn't necessarily have Towen. The heavenly demon king's pupils shook. Crack, it seemed as if he could hear the sound of his pride being damaged. But now, things are different. Swish, thud, as if it wasn't worth listening to any further, the heavenly demon king flew up and stabbed his spear towards Yuan's head. I have it pierce throw hio. Clang, clang, clang. Yuan's hand, which had blocked the spear with his mask, trembled. The stairs that the two were standing on shook precariously as if they would collapse at any moment. The heavenly demon king, his eyes blazing, roared. It seems I've overestimated you. Buzz. Strength was added to the tip of the dropped spear. A spear wielded without any special skills, full of magic power. Clang, clang, clang. The spear cut through the empty air and destroyed the stairs that Yuan was standing on. You didn't know your place. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The spears moved without rest. The spears that were swung around fiercely like a storm soon wrapped around sharp winds. Wu Wan, who jumped up the stairs, hurriedly distanced himself from the different reactions of the heavenly king compared to the previous day. I guess he's quite angry. It was almost impossible to avoid all of those spears. It was no different from trying to avoid the wind. In that case, heavenly steps, activated. Movement speed will increase by 100% for 5 seconds. You can walk in the sky for 5 seconds. Wu Wan's body floated up. Walking in the air was something he could do on his own after his magical power stat had exceeded 100, but using heavenly steps made it as easy as running on the ground. Bu Wang, Quadadad, whoosh. Eventually, the long staircase collapsed. The heavenly king turned his body and glared at Wu Wan, who was out of reach of the tip of his spear. He avoided it all. It was a speed that was difficult to follow with the eyes, even for a moment. He's skilled enough to talk back arrogantly. But that was only for a moment. You can only use heavenly steps once a day. Just like now, avoiding the Heavenly King's spear was just a one-time chance. Instead, Wu Wen had something else he believed in. Danpeng. Squirm. A small child squirmed in Wu Wen's arms. Daddy. Danpeng, who stuck his head out, looked up at Wu Wen's face. Wu Wen looked down at Danpeng and opened his mouth. Please. As soon as he finished speaking. I don't know what you're trying to do. Pot. As if he couldn't stand to watch any longer, the Heavenly King jumped towards Wu Wen again. If you want to gouge out an eye, put your neck out first. Creepy. The Heavenly King, who was running forward, stopped abruptly. With the spear he was swinging forward stopped, the Heavenly King stared at the being that had appeared in front of him for a moment. I think I understand what you meant now. Creak. A strange beast with its mouth open right in front of his nose. Were you hiding something like this? Predator. Around Wu Wen, the predator's teeth were revealed with a black background. Chapter 239. Wu Jin asked the Demon King about when he faced the predator through Dan Ah. That guy, his teeth were pretty sharp. He said it as if it was nothing, but Wu Jin saw the wound that the Demon King showed him clearly. The Demon King was known to have the greatest physique in the tower, next to Hercules. The reason he could be called the King of Great Strength was thanks to his strong physique. However, there was a deep wound on the Demon King's hand. It meant that the predator's teeth were that strong. Can't you control it? Wu Jin shook his head at the question. The predator only came out to satisfy its hunger, and it had never moved according to Wu Jin's will. However, it's my power, so there's no way I can't control it. It wasn't impossible to control the predator. It was just that he hadn't found the way yet. That's why Wu Jin looked for a way. Dan Ah consumes divine power. The predator rejoices. Growl. A roar came out from its teeth. The predator laughed happily after sucking Dan Ah's divine power. Hiss. The predator's form, which was just teeth, gradually changed into a blurry shape. A form with no clear shape. Wu Jin spoke to it. Bite it. Quote exclamation mark quote. Wah. A pitch-black mouth filled his vision. The tabletop king twisted his body. Crunch. The teeth instantly devoured the spot where the tabletop king had been standing just a moment ago. The predator, which had chewed and swallowed a pile of rocks instead of the tabletop king, soon started to move again. The tabletop king's spear tip moved. Once again, his spear caused a storm. Kwa. In an instant, the tabletop king's spear grinded down the predator's teeth. But that was only for a moment. Srrr. The teeth, which seemed to have disappeared, came together again and persistently chased the tabletop king. There's no point in fighting those teeth. The tabletop king's gaze turned to where Wu Jin was standing. I have to catch that guy. There was no point in continuing to fight an enemy whose form he couldn't see. Judgment and action happened almost simultaneously. It was a movement based on instinct. However, did I look fine? Crackle. Tartarus is activated. Magic burst out of Wu Jin's hand. Along with the magic that was emitted from Uranus's heart, Wu Jin's sword and the tabletop king's spear collided. Zong. Goo. As the magic of the two collided, the shock went up into the sky. The magic, which didn't lean to either side and rose up, created a giant pillar. A sword that wouldn't budge. The tabletop king's eyes shook. And that slight shaking was what created the gap. Clang, 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 clang. He felt a hard and sharp sensation in his arms and legs. At the same time, the spear that was gripped in the tabletop king's hand split in half. Thud, thud, thud. The split spear knocked off the teeth that were attached to his body. Flesh fell off along with the hard armor, and the predator spit it out as if it had eaten something it shouldn't have. Drip. The tabletop king looked at the blood flowing down his body. They were quite large wounds. However, such things weren't important. So you were hiding something like this. Even though he had been facing the sword and spear right in front of his nose, the tabletop king's eyes no longer saw Wu Jin. Because there were things more dangerous than that lurking around him now. Crack, creak, caw thud. The background had turned black. An eerie feeling with an unknown origin. A single existence with an unknown form was revealing its numerous teeth toward the tabletop king. Ku-ru-ruer. Kwa thud. Zong. The tabletop king's resistance was fierce. He knocked away the countless teeth with his spear and endured Wu Jin's attacks together. No, he wasn't just enduring. Swish. Blood. Splat, splat. Countless spears poured down, fast and fierce enough to make it difficult to avoid them all. Even if he used Fire Eye Golden Truth and Sensory Territory to anticipate the movement of the spears, there were still some attacks mixed in that Yuan could not avoid with his abilities. One by one, the wounds increased. Tabletop Heavenly King's spearmanship was so impressive that even Yuan, who was facing him, could not help but be amazed. Was his talent for magic power lacking? It was surprising why his ranking was only this high. Up close, Tabletop Heavenly King's spearmanship was not lacking at all when compared to General Yilangjian. The saying that Tabletop Heavenly King was the teacher of both the Divine General and the General seemed to be true, as his ability to wield weapons seemed to be superior to both of them. But still, Quaduk, teeth dug into Tabletop Heavenly King's calf. It's not enough to overturn the difference in power. Whether it was because of the pain in his calf, Tabletop Heavenly King's movements paused for a moment. And Yuan did not miss that gap. Kururung, dark clouds gathered in the sky. Lightning, black light fell over Tabletop Heavenly King's head. Tabletop Heavenly King, who had been momentarily stunned by the shock, gritted his teeth and endured it, then began to move again. His mental strength is also considerable. Pot. The tip of the spear drew near. At that moment, Yuan's lips parted. Bite it, Quaduk, Quachik. Tabletop Heavenly King's spear was bitten by the predator's teeth. The sturdy shaft broke, and Tabletop Heavenly King's eyes wavered. What? And that was the end of the fight. Pit. A bright red line approached his eyes. Instinctively, he shook his head, but another instinct gave him a different warning. Never let go of the spear. It was a belief that Tabletop Heavenly King had held onto for a long time as a warrior, and it was another instinct and habit. And that habit, which had brought Tabletop Heavenly King countless victories for a long time, finally gave him his first defeat. Sword of Kusanagi, Shuwa, his waist, along with his armor, was cleanly cut. Kuk, and finally, Tabletop Heavenly King's body collapsed to the sword. Yuan, who held the Kusanagi and the Black Knight sword in each hand, looked down at Tabletop Heavenly King, breathing heavily. I've already exceeded my limits. When did he start to endure what was about to collapse? Tabletop Heavenly King spat out blood from his mouth and looked around. These teeth. Tabletop Heavenly King looked at the predators that surrounded him, ready to bite him. They were originally one. That's right. Yuan bowed his head and looked at Danpeng, who was grumbling in his arms. No matter how many there seemed to be, they all came from one person. But, Danpeng tilted his head. In fact, this was the first time he had used the predators in battle. They did not show as much power as when they devoured the outer, but their strong teeth remained. Plus one more thing, there was something he had learned from this fight. The predators do not eat people. The guy who had eaten the outer without hesitation showed no sign of doing so against Tabletop Heavenly King. No, rather, he spat out the flesh that had entered his mouth, reacting as if he had eaten something he could not eat. The danger has decreased. It was a constant anxiety. What if the predator's teeth try to devour him someday? But if the predators do not eat people, then he could put that anxiety aside a little. Jabak. Yuan began to climb the pile of rubble from the collapsed stairs. After all, is that what you want? Tabletop Heavenly King, who was bleeding on the floor, asked as he watched the direction Yuan was heading. Yuan glanced back at Tabletop Heavenly King and nodded. Yuan, who seemed to have nothing more to say, went his own way. This fight, Tabletop Heavenly King muttered, feeling his consciousness fading. We lost. Joruk, Nada Tewang's sword pierced Wuma Wang's chest. The sensation Atha's hand tip made Nada Tejak cross his eyes narrowly. He had though the had clearly cut, but the feeling transmitted to hand was closer to being hit rather than cut. Boang, a fist stretched out before his eyes. Nada Teja opened his eyes wide and shouted. Waruna, Waruk, Poeong. The flames surrounding Nada Teja and the fist of the Horse King collided. Jijijijij. The ground split into dozens of pieces and the place where the two men were facing each other sank deeply due to the shock. Dozens of beads floated around Nada Teja, who was protecting his body with Waruna. Puck, Pepeik. The beads that flew hit the Horse King's body. Small bruises appeared on the body of the Horse King. However, regardless of that, the Horse King continued to close the distance with Nada Teja. Quat, the true sword of the wrath of the gods in Nada Teja's hand glowed. The Black Horse King's horn, which had absorbed enormous magical power, stretched out towards him. Jaong, the horn and the sword collided. Nada Teja, who had intended to cut off the horn in one breath, made a surprised expression. Did you think it would break that easily? Boang. Goeok, a fist that went deep into the abdomen. Thwack, Quaquaqua, Kururuer. The tall buildings that had been standing high up collapsed due to the shock that pierced through Nautaja's body and was transmitted backward. Nautaja's mouth opened at the shock that was transmitted to every corner of his body. Cuck. Instantly, he felt like vomiting. However, it was not that he was not prepared for the shock. Warururuk. A hot heat that covered the Horse King. Walloon. Kung. Nautaja's foot hit the ground. That moment, Poeong. A huge pillar of fire rising from below engulfed the body of the Horse King. Totic. Nautaja hurriedly regained his balance and escaped from the flames of Waruna. It was a flame made of his own magical power, but it was so powerful that even he could get burned if he stayed in it for too long. You've become much weaker, Chuck. Nautaja stroked his hit abdomen and looked at the Horse King walking out of the flames. His whole body was burned, and his body was full of bruises. It was amazing that he could withstand such an attack with his bare body, but anyway, there was a limit to that body. Your hand is light, Quack. The Horse King clenched his empty hand tightly. Light, are you making excuses for the item? Nautaja clicked his tongue and muttered. How old-fashioned. Quack. Once again, the true sword of the wrath of the gods in Nautaja's hand glowed sharply with enormous magical power. The fight with the Horse King was coming to an end. For some reason, the great heavenly king was not intervening in this fight. Now was the chance, the only chance to catch the great king of heaven and earth. Flash, Quao out, the true sword of the wrath of the gods fell from Nautaja's hand. The Horse King watched the tragedy unfold, as if, this time too, he was going to stop it with his bare body. However, flash, at the same time, another light flashed in the sky. Quirang, a beam of light falling down. For a moment, Nautaja, who mistook it for the dark, was surprised and stepped back. But, it's not the dark. If it was the dark, he had been hit a lot. However, the flow of magical power of what had just happened was completely different from the electric shock emitted by the dark. Is it that guy, a rookie who had suddenly disappeared? He had ignored him, thinking that he was not someone he should care about, but he had actually intervened in his fight. Arrogant, now it's a little fair. Nautaja's gaze turned to the Horse King again. And soon, thud, that's, a pitch-black club in the hand of the Horse King caught Nautaja's eye. Mixed iron cudgel, along with the Ruyi Bang of the great heavenly king, it was a weapon representing the great king of heaven and earth. I received it well. Now, it was emitting an ominous aura from the hand of the Horse King. Chapter 240. There were 3 factors that determined a player's strength. Stats according to level, skills used with those stats, and items that enhanced both of those factors. Numerous players fought over which of those 3 was the most important. However, those who became rankers all knew. Truly skilled players would never neglect the mastery of their skills, nor would they ignore their stats, which were the foundation. And no matter how precious an item was, in the end, the ability to protect it was itself a skill. The power of items varied greatly, just like the level of players. Some items were nothing more than slightly stronger weapons or armor, while other items could turn an ordinary player into a powerhouse with strength equivalent to a ranker. However, for the Bull Demon King, who had been imprisoned in Heaven's prison for a long time, it was precisely the element of item that was missing. That was why the Crown Prince of the Manifestation could gain an advantage against the Bull Demon King. However, the Ruyi Jingu Bang has returned to the Great Sage, Heaven's equals hands. Now, the situation had changed. The Crown Prince of the Manifestation's gaze flickered upwards. The guy who had thrown the Ruyi Jingu Bang down from above. Did he go to find that? He had been a little curious when he suddenly disappeared. However, he had thought that he was an insignificant guy who wouldn't matter in the battle here anyway, but he had created such a variable. I should have killed that guy first. Where are you looking? A voice came from right in front of him. The Crown Prince of the Manifestation glared and turned his head. And that moment, thud, the Crown Prince of the Manifestation's consciousness flew far away and then came back due to the dull shock. Quang, quad, thud, thud, thud. His body flew away and crashed into the ground, entering deep underground. The Crown Prince of the Manifestation was buried deep in the ground, looking up at the faint light above. What the hell happened? As he searched his memory, he recalled seeing the Bull Demon King's Ruyi Jingu Bang at the last moment. As expected, you're wearing hideous weapons all over your body, and you're so ugly. Thud, thud, the Bull Demon King's Ruyi Jingu Bang, which had been tapping his palm with its pitch-black cudgel, rose into the sky. You're disgusting, Nada. Bang, the impact of the down-swinging iron rod crushed the body of Prince Nezha, who was embedded in the ground. Bang, boom, quang, kwa quang. Not just once. As if he was going to end the fight with this one blow, Wang swung the iron rod ferociously. I have to get out of here. If he stayed there any longer, he felt like his body was going to explode and die. Gritting his teeth, Prince Nezha mustered strength in his body and raised his magical power. Kwa Woot. 2 giant pillars of light shot up into the sky. It. A small scratch appeared on Wang's cheek. At the same time, Prince Nezha, who had been buried in the ground by the force of the iron rod, rose back up to the surface. Above the pitch-black rain clouds, Sun Wukong lay half-reclined with his head propped up by one hand, looking down at the fight between Wang and Prince Nezha. My brother will win. His eyes, which were watching the fight with excitement. Yuan clicked his tongue at Sun Wukong's behavior and asked. Aren't you going to help? He's going to win even without me, so why bother? Isn't Prince Nezha higher in the known rankings? Rankings aren't necessarily the order of strength. If that were the case, why fight? Just kneel in order of ranking. Kwa Yang. The iron rod and the staff of judgment collided. Sun Wukong grinned and looked at Wang, who was holding the iron rod in his hand. I can't imagine anyone who can defeat my brother when he's got that in his hand. Zheng. The sound of the 2 weapons colliding reached the sky where Jianduan was. The battlefield was already in a large circle centered around the 2, denying the approach of others. So you don't have to help them. What about you? Sun Wukong's shoulders shook slightly at Yuan's question. It was a habit that came out whenever he was pricked. Haven't you found it yet? I'm looking for it. Stop looking over there and hurry up. Ah, yes. Muttering that it was nagging again, Sun Wukong concentrated again, focusing his eyes. Of course, Sun Wukong wasn't the only one concentrating. Yuan, who had retrieved the iron rod, was also looking around in a hurry. But even though they had the same eyes, the eyes of Sun Wukong and Yuan were vastly different. As expected, I found it. Sun Ogong's lips curled up, and the image of an old man was reflected in his eyes. Hold on tight, Mongyil. The cloud the 2 were riding on shook for a moment. And that moment, you'll get hurt if you fall. 2 quack. Their field of vision changed in an instant. It felt like they were on a fast amusement park ride. It felt like his mind moved before his body, as if his heart had been left where it was. The scenery of heaven passed by like a panorama. The scenery stretched out in an instant, like watercolors that had been accidentally spilled. It was a moment later that the scenery returned to normal. Long time no see. Sun Ogong's back as he greeted someone. Yuan shook his head, hurriedly regained his senses, and looked beyond him. A large and tall hall. The long, bright red carpet in the distance and the tall, golden throne at the end. And sitting on it was a wrinkled old man. What's going on in your majesty's hall? A gentle voice with a chuckle. Even though he already knew, Yuan couldn't readily accept the fact that the old man was the Jade Emperor he had heard of until now. The old man's mask was that thick. You don't know what's going on. Geo Buck. Sun Ogong walked towards the Jade Emperor. Have you forgotten already what you did to us? The guy who had been excited until he came here definitely reacted differently when he actually faced the Jade Emperor. I still haven't forgotten, even after several thousand years. Suoo. It had been a long time. It had been a long time since Sun Ogong had felt such eerie mana. Maybe he was holding back because Yuan was in the same space, but if not, the building they were standing in would have been blown away in an instant. 2,000 years. The Jade Emperor, who had put 2 fingers forward, stood up from his seat. Isn't it time to forget the grudge? Jiamtel. Sun Ogong's shoulders shook slightly. But only for a moment. Sun Ogong's lips curled up as he quickly calmed himself. You haven't changed, not before or now. A strange light appeared in the Jade Emperor's eyes. Something was strange. Maybe something had changed in his mind while he was trapped on Owa Mountain. Or maybe he had matured over time. Originally, he would have been excited and rushed in, but now, he reacted much calmer than before. Of course, however, Yuan thought that this reaction from Sun Wukong was natural. Because he's already experienced it once. He had heard it before. Every time Jade Emperor fought with Sun Wukong, he always targeted his weak points. That's why he was forced to follow Jade Emperor's flow from the start of the fight. A cunning and sly old man. That was Sun Wukong's evaluation of Jade Emperor. And in reality, Yuan thought he understood why Sun Wukong said that. Look, swish. Sun Wukong turned his head and asked with a grinning face. Just like I said. Yuan nodded. There was no room for disagreement here. Whether his answer was satisfactory or not, Sun Wukong turned his head back towards Jade Emperor. He was now holding his staff, which was supporting his crooked back, in his hand like a weapon. Clank. Sun Wukong walked towards Jade Emperor. My 5 brothers. Great Sage, equal to heaven, Zhao Demon King. Great Sage, who covers the heavens, Peng Demon King. Great Sage, who moves mountains, Shituo Demon King. Great Sage, who controls the wind, Monkey King. Great Sage, who drives spirits, Demon King. Each with a different title and name, they were all subjugated at the same time by the Jade Emperor standing right before his eyes. Simply because they were beings who could potentially threaten the heavens in the future. Qua. Magical energy began to pour out of Sun Wukong's body. He had endured enough for a Sun Wukong. Yuan distanced himself from Sun Wukong and looked at Jade Emperor. I'll send you to them this time, too. Jade Emperor. His existence held great significance in the tower. Rank 10. He was a being with a rank that could be counted on 2 hands among the countless high rankers. One of the few rankers who could control the tower's state of affairs using their own power and authority. If he was surpassed, then one would become a ranker within the top 10. However, despite that, there was no one among the countless high rankers who had surpassed Jade Emperor. It was because of the power of Jade Emperor and the force known as the Heavenly Realm that he possessed. However, right now, the Jade Emperor's Grand Hall was collapsing. Rumble. Yuan looked down while riding on Wukong's cloud. Inside the building with the collapsing red roof, Wukong and the Jade Emperor were fighting in the smoky haze. The first was the Bull Demon King. The second was Sun Wukong. And next, while he was trying to devise a way to win the fight against the heavens, Sun Wukong answered Yuan's question. I won't need a next. You won't need it. I have my Hung. What else would I need? The conversation paused for a moment at those words. He didn't need anything else. Just having the Ruyi Jingu Bang was enough. That's what Sun Wukong said. And at the time, Yuan had thought of Sun Wukong's words as the same old boasting or excessive confidence. You'll win 1 out of 100 times. In other words, you'll lose 99 out of 100 times. I've fought the Jade Emperor twice. The 2 heavenly wars. Sun Wukong had reached the Jade Emperor in both of them. I wasn't in good condition either time. But I still gained something. Yuan's eyes lit up at those words. 2 fights. Sun Wukong got stronger after each fight. But even Yuan couldn't imagine Sun Wukong losing to an opponent he had fought twice. Furthermore, he didn't think that even Sun Wukong would show such excessive confidence in this situation. Trust me. Bang. Sun Wukong struck his own chest. If I can just find the Jade Emperor. Creak. Gritting his teeth, Sun Wukong uttered the next words. I'll kill that bastard. He trusted him. Sun Wukong was one of the few rankers Yuan trusted. Yuan didn't know about scheming, but Sun Wukong had never disappointed him when it came to fighting. He had always fought a step ahead of him and had always won. And it was the same this time. The guy who's there right now isn't the Sun Wukong who fought the Jade Emperor twice. That belief was much stronger than before. He lost the 2 fights, then fought the Jade Emperor again and won. Thud. The Ruyi Jingu Bang flew up into the sky. Yuan's lips curled up as he looked at the Jade Emperor hanging on the end of it. He's the guy who went through the war with the outer gods with me.